For more chapters, join my Patreon, link in description. Academy's Undercover Professor, Chapter 1, To the Empire's Capital. 1. Most parents recommended high-ranking jobs such as doctor and judge when their children dreamed of their future job. That was because the jobs that ended with the letter SA were all well acknowledged. T/L note. Doctors and judges were USA and Pansa in Korean, and most of the high-ranking jobs in Korean ended with SA. Or they would at least recommend a civil servant job, which was said to be a quite good job with stable income as well. No parent wanted their child to go through a tiring and difficult path. However, it was very different in my case. My son, you should be a shaman. What? That was what my mother said to me when I lost my father early and grew up with my unreliable younger sister. Although my family was not very lean or poor, I still studied hard to become a doctor in order to earn money, or perhaps to be a scientist or a developer. What my mother recommended to me, who had made such meticulous plans towards a scientific route, was not a liberal arts route or even music and physical education, but it was a path of a completely different level. How should I say it? Was it theology? Oh, what did you say? You didn't hear me right, so I'll say it again. You have to be a shaman. But I don't want to. My answer was firm. I wasn't going to be a shaman. Why all of a sudden my mother's eyebrows shook once at my daring answer, then she spoke in a strong tone. You have the qualities of a shaman. All kinds of deities are looking after you. You have no other path than to become a shaman. I was dumbfounded to hear that. The qualities of a shaman, she said. I had such a talent, she said. Other than the absurdity of it, I just didn't think of anything. After that, my mother mainly said things that she should not have said to her son, such as saying I had unique qualities and that I was destined to suffer if I did not become a shaman and experience shaman possession. What did I say back then? Never, I don't want to. If you don't, you'll experience a big disaster someday. I'm saying this out of concern for you. If it's for me, you should have supported me on the path I want to walk on. I remembered saying that sternly and shutting myself in my room. To be frank, I was rightfully resentful and upset. She couldn't compliment her child, who had been planning his life since his puberty in middle school, yet she told him to give up everything and become a shaman. Instead, those words prompted me to study harder with a sense of defiance. My mother kept bothering me and forcing me to do religious things, and even taught me strange knowledge such as myths, magic, and sorcery. But I didn't give up. The more she did so, the more it raised my anger as I gained all kinds of rational knowledge to strengthen my brain. After more than 10 years, when I had grown to be an adult and became a member of society, I had died. It was a car accident. It was really ridiculous. Was that what my mother meant about experiencing a disaster? And what was even more surprising was something that happened afterwards. I was alive. To be exact, I was dead once, but then I was reborn. I couldn't believe the afterlife existed. I had thought everything my mother said was a lie, but who would have thought that it was all true? Foolishly, human beings would not realize what they had not experienced in person, and I could feel it bitterly through the experience of death. And what am I doing now? It will be included in the class. Everyone, open your textbook. Continuing on from last time, I'll teach you how to draw a magic circle. I'm a professor at the Academy of Magic. How did this happen? A magic engineering locomotive that spurted out white steam arrived at the station. Click, choo-choo. The sound of compressed steam spewing resounded out refreshingly as irons were interlocked to each other. The passengers who were waiting at the station got on the train one by one, and while watching the scene, I took a deep breath before boarding the train. My body even felt refreshed due to the clear air that permeated my lungs. The sky was clear without a single trace of clouds, and even a pleasant freshness could be felt in the cold air of the winter season that had just ended. There was not much time left until the departure of the magic engineering locomotive, which was heading to the Exilian Empire. I raised my hand and brushed my face lightly. I felt a peculiar foreign sensation through my gloved hands. The face camouflage mask definitely sticks well. It was inevitable because I had to hide my identity. I got on the train with a natural step in order not to arouse suspicion from other people. "Let me check your ticket," the conductor spoke to me as I got on the train. I took the ticket out of the frock coat's pocket that I wore and handed it over to him. "Confirmed. Mr. Gerard, have a nice trip." After receiving a formal greeting from the conductor, I replied with a slight nod. When I checked the ticket I took back from him, room 403 was written on it. In other words, it was the third cabin of the fourth compartment. The corridor was narrow enough for only one person to walk around, but it was long, and the doors lined up at a large gap on one side. The magic engineering train I had just boarded wasn't called a luxury train for no reason. Thus all the seats were divided into each room in the long hallway. Room 401, room 402, room 403, here it is. I checked the plaque before I opened the door and went inside. The moment I opened the door, I smelled the strong scent of old trees. The inside wasn't that fancy, but it had everything that was essential. A comfortable-looking seat that was divided from left to right and storage space for luggage, along with a signal bell that was installed to call the clerk if I needed anything. This isn't bad. I hadn't packed heavy luggage in my bag, so I only moved forward and sat down lightly on my seat. The seat was soft, maybe because it was a luxurious train. Looking out of the window, the vast scenery of the northern mountain range was engraved in my sight. The tops of the sharply towering mountain range were covered with white snow, making them look like giants that were wearing white cone hats. The train would soon squeeze through the cracks of that mountain range. Now that I've come this far, can I be relieved? My name is Gerard. I was once an ordinary person living in South Korea. Of course, that was my past life, and I had died in a mysterious car accident. The place where I woke up after I died like that was the world I am in right now. A mysterious world where magic and science coexisted, completely different from Earth. I was enjoying my new second life here. I'm on the train to the Empire, so I'll rest until I get there. The Exilian Empire. It was known to be the largest and most powerful nation on the continent. It was the birthplace of magic engineering, where magic and machines coexisted equally, and it was the place where wizards and magic towers existed. I was heading to that empire on the train. Is the big city of Leathervelk the transit station in the middle of the trip? I checked the contents of the information pamphlet next to my seat after I pulled it out. The scheduled final destination of the magic engineering train, which was just departing, was the capital of the empire. However, there was no way that there would be a train heading to the capital of a country directly from the border of another country. It was the same even for the first-class magic engineering train, which only the qualified and rich people could ride. Naturally, there were two transit stations in the middle of the trip. Leathervelk was the first one, and it could be seen as a city that was more famous than the capital in some ways, because it was the place where Magic Academy, the dream of all aspiring wizards, existed. Is it an academy? What an amazing world. It had been decades since I had started living my second life, but there were still many things that I couldn't adapt to. The sense of separation from my past life must have been great. But the academy wasn't a place that had anything to do with me anyway. I didn't have to worry about it. Bump. While I was immersed in such thoughts, the train vibrated slightly once. Are they going to depart slowly? Woo woo oh woo. As I expected, the train honked to announce its departure. Within a minute at the earliest, the train would run through the vast northern mountains. Am I going to be alone in this room? It'd be nice since it's comfortable. While I was immersed in such foolish thoughts, the door of room 403 opened with a rattle as if it had been waiting for that moment. It wasn't the clerk. A well-dressed man in his mid-20s came inside. He was handsomely tall, and he wore a brown frock coat with a design similar to mine. There was no way a train clerk would wear such clothes, so it meant he was the guest who would use the same room as me. Speak of the devil. I didn't know there was another passenger. I was wrong in thinking that I could have a comfortable trip without feeling some sort of constraint. When I was sighing inwardly like that, the other person looked at me and greeted me. Hello. He greeted me first, so I nodded my head slightly and accepted his greeting. I didn't want to exchange words for a long time, so I responded to him as if I had a silent personality. He didn't care much about my behavior and sat in the seat across from me. Woo-woo-oh-woo. The train started to depart with a loud horn. At first, the magic engineering locomotive rattled and shook, but the shaking disappeared as soon as the speed increased. The tickets weren't pricey for no reason. Just as the high price was beyond an ordinary person's purchasing ability, the level of speed and convenience were different compared to ordinary steam locomotives. The scenery outside the transparent window quickly flashed past me. The snow piled high, and the needle-leaf trees stood firmly in the snow. The white snow mountain that covered all of it was so beautiful that it naturally drew my attention. However, after I kept watching it for 10 to 20 minutes, I got tired of it because it was getting boring. I took out the newspaper that was stuck together next to the pamphlet and opened it. There were no laptops or smartphones in this world, so the only things that I could use to kill time were books and newspapers. The Civil War in the Kingdom of Utah is over. The princess's faction. One such an article was showcased prominently on the front page of the newspaper. Until recently, a civil war had been ongoing, and it was the Kingdom of Utah that had recruited a large number of mercenaries from all over the country. And it was also the country where the train station from which the magic engineering train departed from was located. A black and white photograph was embedded between articles printed in black-letter fonts. It was a picture of the princess's faction that had announced their victory in the war. So the civil war in the Kingdom of Utah is over. A voice was heard beyond the newspaper. I lowered the newspaper that was covering my face slightly and stared at the man across from my seat. If he asked me directly like that, I couldn't just ignore it, so I opened my mouth. Yeah, I was wondering when it would end. I'm glad it ended faster than I thought it would. It wasn't long ago that the prince's faction gathered a large number of mercenaries and military strength from all over the country, yet they still lost. I'm glad it ended early, but it's not like there wasn't any damage at all. Really? Oh, I'm late to introduce myself. I'm Ludger Chelosy. Ludger Chelosy. Since he has a surname, is he a nobleman? However, he showed no arrogance or rudeness particular to the aristocracy. My name is Gerard. I do not have a surname. I didn't have a surname. In other words, I had revealed that I was a commoner. Oh. You don't have to be too uncomfortable. I'm from a fallen aristocrat family. Oh, I see. Him being a fallen aristocrat made sense. They were aristocrats, but not actual aristocrats. Where are you going, Mr. Gerard? I'm heading to Line de Bruno, the capital of the empire. I've got business there. Well, if someone as good as you has business there, it would certainly be something great, right? I smirked and shook my head at the joke that Mr. Ludger had told me. It's not work-related, it's just a visit for some sightseeing. Sightseeing, you said. That's good, too. I've only heard it, but the Exilian Empire has developed a lot of magical technology, so there's a lot to see. Then where are you going, Mr. Ludger? I'm going to Leathervelk. Leathervelk is where the academy exists. Do you happen to have business there? Yeah. Well, I'm not bragging, but I'm assigned to be a professor at Surin Academy. Whoa. I was genuinely impressed. The Empire's largest academy of magic, Surin. The place where all kinds of the wonder children that existed on the continent gathered. It was a cultivation ground of the future to carve the jades that would bear the world into jewels. Of course, the students who gathered there only consisted of children with the best talents, and the professors who taught them were those who had been strictly selected accordingly. It meant that the man in front of me was one of them. You seem to be young, but your skill must be outstanding. No, it's just that the public thinks highly of me. Actually, I passed the exam by the skin of my teeth at a critical moment. I've heard that there are enormous people who failed because they still couldn't satisfy the academy with the skin of their teeth. I think you should be proud enough. Thank you for your appraisal of me. Oh, rather than that, about the Civil War in the Kingdom of Utah, have you heard of the rumor? What rumor? They said that there was a leading figure in the Civil War that led to the victory of the princess's faction. Leading figure, huh? But to my surprise, they said that he was neither a skillful wizard nor a high-ranking knight but a wandering mercenary. a wandering mercenary who had made great contributions to the victory of a nation's civil war. It hadn't been revealed in the newspaper yet, but was it that word of mouth had spread among the people? Mercenary Machiavelli. That's his name? I see. I chimed in at his words in a slightly apathetic tone. You're not that surprised, are you? Ha ha, I just think it's a false rumor. I had said that I didn't know, but it was actually a lie. I knew the name Mercenary Machiavelli very well. There's no way I couldn't know. Because Machiavelli was the identity I used before Gerard. Chapter 2, To the Empire's Capital 2. But why had the man in front of me asked me about Machiavelli's existence? It was also a fake identity that I had been using until not long before then. No way. Is he doing it on purpose because he knows? What is his hidden intention? For a moment, I suspected that he was a tracer sent by the princess's faction of the Kingdom of Utah, but I didn't think so. Ludger hadn't taken any other action other than asking me the question. Rather, his eyes and actions showed something closer to pure curiosity. So it's just a mere coincidence? A professor of Surin. Surin Academy was so famous that news regarding it had passed by on word of mouth even to faraway countries. The fact that such a young man was to be Surin's newly appointed professor meant that the person in front of me was a person with great talent. I surely didn't know it at first, but I could gradually feel that something was odd with that guy. But instead of raising my guard, I shook my head inwardly. Let's just say it's a coincidence for now. I couldn't let it show because I'd feel guilty. I naturally turned to the next page of the newspaper and listened to his words. If there was really someone like that, he would have been in the newspapers. Ha ha, well, there are things that aren't easily revealed to the public. That's interesting. Is it okay for you to say that to someone you've just met today? Well, there's no reason why I can't do it, right? And, Mr. Gerard, it's my first time seeing you today, but somehow I feel like we're on the same page. I'm grateful that Surin's reputable professor has a good opinion of such an old man. Ludger didn't seem to be able to take his interest off of me, perhaps because he had a good image that was well-liked by others. He couldn't let it pass quietly without a word. Because it had become like that, I decided to respond to him appropriately. Still, having a companion to talk with made me less lonely, so there was nothing bad about it. Mr. Ludger, when you arrive in Surin, will you go to a lesson right away? Not immediately, but I'll have to wait a while. Teaching first year? No, I'm in charge of the second year. Oh, so you teach the second year. Don't newly appointed professors usually handle the new students in the first year? Well, you're more amazing than I thought you'd be. It was only a rumor I had heard, but Surin Magic Academy had an image that was close to a university when judged compared to Earth. It was said that all kinds of buildings were built on a huge expanse of land, and that there were already thousands of units only for the employees who lived and worked there. Although it was adjacent to a large city, Surin's scale was literally close to a small city, so there were even some comparisons going around that it was like two cities next to each other. The students of Surin ranged from first year to fifth year. Usually, the higher the year, the smarter the children become, so it would be fundamental to have a competent professor in the senior year and a newly appointed professor in the first year. But I couldn't believe he was going to teach the second year from the start of his appointment. I had thought that he might be quite a great man, but he turned out to be more than that. He wouldn't be able to become a professor in Surin for no reason. The Academy of Witchcraft and Wizardry. This was a world that had achieved an industrial revolution called iron and steam, but if I should pick a different aspect from the Earth, of course, it was the existence of magic. I've only seen it in fantasy novels before. The existence of magic was inseparable from this world, and most definitely, magic was always the exclusive possession of the chosen ones, because one couldn't use magic if they couldn't handle it. But, unlike in the past, where only aristocrats of noble blood could use it those days, there was an exponentially growing number of skill supremacies, as common people could also learn magic as long as they had the talent. Surin was the place where one could get into the top magic academy with just that skill. I'm curious at this point. What kind of place is it? Usually, when it came to a magic academy, I couldn't help but think of a famous literary work from when I lived on Earth. Students flying around on brooms and using magic with wooden sticks. Perhaps children who came across that kind of magic school's movies and books in their childhood had dreams about it. A magic school. There was nothing as dreamy as that, but there really was such a thing in this world. Students who learned magic and enjoyed their youth. In my past life, my father had died early, so I couldn't afford to enjoy it. I had studied like crazy with the obligation to support my family, and I was under pressure to succeed. My second life wasn't particularly different from my previous life. No, it was even worse. There was a reason why I had been walking around hiding my identity. I must be wanting something out of nothing if I wished for it now as well. It had been about 27 years since I had been born in this world and lived again. I was no longer on the path of burning youth, or whatever you would call it. The Academy of Magic, or whatever, was just a story from a different world. It was still the same regarding the man called Ludger in front of me, who was closely related to the Academy. I, who lived with a false identity to hide my true identity, and that man, who stood on the shining stage of Surin, were extremely different. But since he had become a Surin professor at a young age, I decided to congratulate him earnestly. 'Cause he's a fallen nobleman. There were still classes of society in this world, and the nobles were definitely the pinnacle of such classes in society. However, those who were in such a place and fell to the abyss existed, whether it was because of their rebellion against the state, or they got on the wrong side of those with higher statuses, or they were in huge debts. Anyway, those nobles had fallen to the abyss for various reasons. Fallen aristocrat. Considering that fallen aristocrats were more despised by their fellow aristocrats than by the commoners, the man named Ludger in front of me must have made a really bloody effort until he became a professor at Surin. While I was immersed in such thoughts, I felt something strange outside. What is it? I had no choice but to be filled with strange anxiety as I threw a slight glance out of the window. The atmosphere was strange. The air was heavy, to be exact. It was as if something was going to happen. "What's wrong?" Ludger asked, seeming to feel something odd with my response. I didn't answer, and I had my 5 senses on edge. Something was coming. Is something? It was the moment Ludger was about to open his mouth. A powerful jolt along with a huge explosion shook the magic engineering train violently. The train's cabin shook, and the train that was running on the railroad swung to the side. I held the chair's handle firmly in order to balance my body. "What is this? Did the engine burst?" Ludger muttered so, but I shook my head as I didn't know. The engine didn't seem to have burst. There was no way the whole train would shake because of one engine going out. In addition, when it came to safety, there was no way that the engine of an exclusive magic engineering locomotive would explode by itself. There must have been something. A reason why that explosion had been inevitable. It seemed that my uneasy imagination wasn't wrong, as something began to run busily, thumping loudly on the ceiling of the train. At the same time, a loud noise was heard from the leading compartment, the sound of something breaking and of people screaming. I realized exactly what had happened. It's a raid. A raid? On this train? Most of the passengers on this magic engineering train are wealthy merchants and aristocrats. The robbers in the northern mountains must have done this while aiming for them. Most of the passengers on that expensive magic engineering locomotive were rich people. Obviously, there were many people who were after their money and valuables, and raids by the robbers who were targeting those trains occasionally took place. Even so, I can't believe they're doing this on the train that's heading from the border to the Empire. Those bastards who attacked right then were pretty much not in their right mind either. They were so daring that they even became extremely reckless. The explosion that shook the train a little while ago, I don't think it's from a normal force. I narrowed my eyes because I had something that I had speculated. Is it magic? There was a wizard among the raiders. If a wizard was involved, such a bold move was feasible. If they quickly robbed and escaped with the help of a wizard, they could hide safely in the steep northern Arret Mountains. It would have been hard to chase them. If that something was what they were planning, they were definitely not ordinary robbers. If they had a wizard with such firepower and attacked a train with aristocrats on board, those bold guys could never be ordinary people in the first place. Since magic existed in this world, there were also some people who did bad things with magic. Mr. Ludger, I think you should hide or avoid the attack for now. Ludger nodded as he listened to my words. Ludger picked up his luggage. Did he try to take his bag in that situation? There must have been something important inside it. I stood up because I also wasn't in a position to worry about others. The first one to take the lead was Ludger. I'll stand in front of you just in case. Yes. For the moment, my identity was as a commoner in his 40s who had a lot of money. That guy who became an academy professor in his mid-20s would fight better. Ludger took out a small wooden wand in his right hand and raised his guard. The two of us opened the room's door and examined the movement in the corridor of compartment 4. There wasn't anyone in sight yet. The passengers seemed to be waiting quietly in their rooms for the moment. It's the wrong choice. It was said that the cabins themselves were protected by magic, but the robbers who attacked were not ordinary people either. In that situation, sitting still in the cabin was like sticking out your own neck to be slaughtered. In times like that, the best plan was to stay as far away from those robbers as possible. But there's no way the robbers who penetrated compartment 3 haven't entered here yet. I thought that they'd scatter right away and then extort money and valuables from the passengers. But was I wrong? Or maybe they were after the first compartment, in front of ours. The first compartment was the first-class seating where the nobles stayed. It was a VIP room that was strictly protected. In other words, it was the golden egg that had the most money. It's a relief. We just needed to step back while they were drawn to the first compartment. Of course, rescue signals were installed in that kind of magic engineering train to prepare for an unexpected attack, and in case of an emergency. The backup force would probably be running in the early hours. I just had to hang in there until they arrived. Crash. At that moment, a man broke into the hallway window. As he was fluttering the snow from his shoulders, which he had not brushed off yet, he raised his head and stared at us after he sensed our presence. His eyes were severely bloodshot. His first impression is brutal. Is he high on drugs? His appearance, which was suffused with hatred and anger, seemed to be completely different from a robber's. In that cold weather, I wondered if he was going all out after waiting for the train. Egg. But before I could reveal that mystery, he yelled at us when he found us first. At the same time, Ludger revealed his magic. It was a sorcery in which thread-like strands of magic power were carved in the air in front of the wand. The sorcery that seemed to carve a three-dimensional picture in the air soon combined into a single spell. ZZZT. A flash of light penetrated the intruder's chest when it seemed that a blue lightning bolt had formed. Egg. The robber, who was rushing toward our side, fell flat onto the floor stomach first and shook his body. "Did you kill him?" I asked while looking at Ludger. "No, I just incapacitated him," Ludger replied before slowly approaching the fallen robber with a cautious face. He continued to aim his wand at the body. "Wait, Mr. Ludger, it's dangerous. It's all right. I'm just going to interrogate him a little bit about his purpose for attacking the train." "No, I mean..." I tried to say something more, but Ludger moved without listening. He turned the fallen robber's body upward with his foot. "Tell me, why did you attack this train?" "Uag, ha, ha, ha. Did you just laugh in this situation? We need to kill everyone." What lay in that stammering voice was a frigid madness that was enough to make anyone's skin shudder. The robber laughed as his body convulsed and he bled from his nose. At the same time, his tightly wrapped coat fell open, revealing an object hidden inside. It was a huge bomb. With his eyes wide open as he saw that, before Ludger could unleash a spell, the robber pressed the detonator that he had prepared in advance and held in his hand. Boom! A huge explosion swept through compartment 4. Chapter 3, Great Train Raid 1. The foggy dust caused by the explosion subsided. Uag. Crouching down, I woke up while shaking off the broken debris that covered my body. Fortunately, there were no injuries to my body. Even the broken debris couldn't pierce the coat I had been wearing. It's a good thing I wore a sturdy one, just in case. The corridor and the wall of the compartment, which had been fine not long before, were completely blown away. The chilly wind that was running on the snowfield blew through the gap and scratched my face like a blade. I thought it was a normal robbery. I couldn't believe he had detonated a bomb that was wrapped around his body in a situation where he was electrocuted by electricity magic. That was something that would never be seen from a train robber. It was more severe than a robbery, and they were closer to fanatics, if I may say so. The mindset of dying together even though he knew he was going to die. Are they the rebel remnants of the prince's faction who fled the kingdom of Utah? No, they're busy hiding right now. These bastards are different. As I was sweeping my face with my hands in frustration, I sighed, feeling my loose skin. No wonder the cold wind was cutting into my face. It's expensive, though. What a shame. Rip. I took off the camouflage mask that I had been wearing on my face. I didn't need to keep using it since it was already torn due to the shock of the explosion and the grazing of the debris, since I couldn't keep the face of a man in his 40s with wrinkles and whiskers anymore. I threw the camouflage mask out of the train. I thought the train was going to be a little safe, but I didn't expect an unpredictable incident to happen. Come to think of it, where is he? Ludger, who had said he was going to be a professor at Surin Academy, could not be seen. Soon after, I realized something. When the explosion had happened, he couldn't react and was likely swept away. The desolated wall was half blown away and broken. There was no trace of Ludger. When I slightly stuck my head out and looked down, I saw a steep cliff. Deep down the cliff, there was a raging blizzard and foggy snow clouds that buried its base. He must be dead. Anyone who thought that he was a mere robber would be bewildered when the robber blew himself up with a bomb. If he had known beforehand, he could have prepared a spell, but unexpected situations always happened. What a pity for him. To think he had died on the day he was appointed as a professor for the famous Surin Academy. I prayed for the repose of Ludger's soul with a small, silent prayer. It's not time for me to be relaxed either. Since I knew that they were no ordinary robbers, my alert level was several stages higher than before. If they were all going to blow themselves up when their plans went awry, no matter how strongly that magic engineering train was protected by various spells, it might derail. That could be their real aim, seeing that kind of extreme act happen. Let's run away. After making that decision, I headed to the compartment behind that one, S-Rock. When the door from compartment 4 to compartment 5 opened, a conductor with his face full of tension appeared. "Oh, sir, are you all right? What on earth is hap?" He was slightly bewildered and stuttered at the sight of me standing alone in the corridor and at the bulkhead that had flown away. "There's a robber attack. They're armed with dangerous explosives. I was almost swept away by it," I replied calmly. I see. I think they're focused on compartment number 1, so we'd better step back." "Oh, I was actually about to evacuate the other passengers to the back." "That's a relief." I approached the conductor with a relieved face. And as soon as I narrowed down the distance so I could reach him by stretching my arm, I grabbed the conductor's collar and threw him down to the ground. "Bomb? Arg, why are you doing this? Did you think that kind of petty acting would work in front of me? Pardon." The conductor looked up at me with a confused face. If it were someone else, they would have erased their doubts by looking at his extremely victimized expression, but I was not convinced. I thought something was odd. I refuse to believe that it's so easy to break through the magic engineering train, which is protected by strong defensive magic and magical stones attached to it. And right when it was running fast through the rugged Arret Mountain, raiders appeared as if they had been waiting. What? It's practically impossible without someone working from inside the train assisting, unless someone turned off the magic that should have been operating. At that moment, the conductor's face changed in an instant. He moved his hand and tried to pull something out, but I already knew and had prepared for it. I thrust a sharp knife under his chin. "Stay still." "Erg, you're quick to move. As expected, this is not an ordinary robbery. Tell me, where do you guys come from? Or keep your mouth shut." "Well, that's up to you." I wasn't really curious about it anyway. I lifted that man up with a knife around his neck. If my prediction was correct, something might have happened in the compartment that he had come from, compartment 5. Move. With a knife held in my right hand on his neck, I overpowered him by bending both his arms back with my left hand and then kicked his feet. Ooeg. He clenched his teeth and refused to budge, but when I twisted his arm a little more, he immediately moved. He should have done it from the start. How many colleagues do you have here? So you won't say it. Then I'll have to make you talk. At that moment, something was heard from compartment number 5 where he had come from. It was a small sound that could almost not be heard from compartment number 4, where a blast of cold wind blew from outside the train from its missing bulkhead. My extremely alert ears caught the sound properly. Click. It was something I had heard so often that I recognized the familiar sound immediately, metals colliding with each other. It was the sound of a rifle hammer being pulled. Knowing so, I threw the conductor forward and fell flat on my stomach right away. Rat-a-tat-a-tat-a-tat-a. Immediately above my head, a barrage of countless bullets penetrated the door and passed through. The conductor I had just pushed fell as he was honeycombed with bullet holes without being able to react. Debris and dust were scattered. I covered my head with my hand and glared at the door. The bullets showed no signs of stopping soon. Is it a machine gun? They've prepared very well. Then they had no choice but to take that action as well. When I was thinking about it, they stopped shooting, thinking it was enough. He shot his colleague mercilessly even though his colleague was crossing the compartment. They didn't even let him send any signals. It meant that the conductor, who had already become a hole-filled rag, had told them in advance. If they don't hear from him for a while, he must have been caught, so shoot him relentlessly. The suicide bomb terrorists were like that as well. I'm sure they're crazy. Why did this happen when I got on this train? I got up from my position while sighing at my unfortunate life. After shaking off the powder and dust on my body, I glared at the door again. Soon after, the door was smashed and 3 bulky men rushed into the corridor. What? There's still someone alive. We shot that much and he didn't die. Who are you to talk about dying or not as you please? I uttered in an irritated voice while looking at them talking amongst themselves. They exchanged glances and soon began to approach me in a ferocious manner. The corridor was narrow enough for only one person, so if I had to go against them, I had to deal with one person at a time. It was obvious that they looked much rougher and heavier than I was. I didn't want to fight if I could avoid it. I refused to have a clash in a pointless place, but if I surrender now, they won't accept it. Looking at the people who approached me with the determination to kill me, no matter what I tried to do to appease them, they wouldn't buy it. They had not the slightest bit of intention to let me live. I want to ask you one thing. My unfriendly tone made them raise their eyebrows in offense, but I had no choice. It was just my nature. What? Are you going to cry for your life now? No way. How dare you attack this train? Aren't you afraid to die? The rescue team will be here soon, right? Ha. I wondered what it was, so it was just lame intimidation. The guy at the forefront snorted at my warning and drew a sword that suited his size. I had asked him seriously, but he seemed not to think my question was worth answering. I'll cut you in half with a single slash. The big man slowly approached me and I slowly backed away. However, the partially destroyed train's cabin had a limit, and naturally my steps had to stop. If I tried to step back any further, I would fall outside the broken train. Hee, there's no place for you to run anymore. I see. If I jumped out of the train from there, I would end up like Ludger. However, my front was blocked by his large body, so I had to pass through them to go forward. I'm busy, so I'll finish you as soon as possible. It was when he was about to spring out at me while spouting such words. I invoked the spell I had prepared in advance. Boom! The sound of an explosion spread through the air as the man who was about to swing his sword at me bounced back like a cannonball. Thump, bam. Those who were standing absent-mindedly behind him could not react and bounced off each other before rolling on the floor. Ooeg. WH what? A wizard? It was quite powerful magic power, but there was no sign of much distress as they were pretty strong. No. They were wearing something inside their clothes, to be exact. Was it like a protective suit? Then I should just give a stronger blow. I carved a sorcery while releasing the mana I had gathered. The three-dimensional pattern that was drawn in the air soon turned into a spell, and in an instant, it became a big wind and lifted the men who were about to stand up into the air. They must have been confused because it felt like an invisible giant hand was clutching them. "Oh, ooh. Let go of this. Put me down." "I'll put you down, just as you asked." I used the wind to move them by myself, to the outside of the wide-open train. "Saw, save me, please, I beg you." They shouted desperately, but I didn't say yes or that I would spare them. They were the bastards who attacked that train with the intention of killing everyone. They would stab me in the back if I showed them any mercy. As I threw them out of the train, their screams echoed and slowly faded into the distance. Tusk. Having gotten rid of the attacker, I pulled a hair tie out of my pocket while arranging my hair, which had become quite messy. Because I didn't pay much attention to beauty treatments, my hair had become quite long, and if I didn't arrange it in time, it would be quite cumbersome. I tied my flowing hair together around the back of my neck. It's better now. While I was thinking of running away again, the door of compartment number 3 opened and new people appeared. Once I got rid of one group, others kept appearing. There seemed to be no end to it. That was why I wanted to leave quickly. What the? The men who came from the 3rd compartment saw me standing alone inside the half-destroyed 4th compartment, and my face hardened coldly. "Kill him?" Someone who seemed to be their captain was furious as he gave the order. At the same time, the guys who were waiting pointed their rifles at me. Looking at it, I desperately held back my sigh. Yeah. What can I do? Now that I've come this far, I should see the end of it. "Shoot." The captain gave the order, and his subordinates pulled the trigger. But the bullets didn't come out. Clack, clack. "Oh, ooh. What are you doing?" The guns are broken." "What?" While everyone was talking, I prepared the next spell. If they were together like that, it was easy to get rid of them from where I was standing. But there was one thing that I had looked over. There was also a wizard among them. Shuo, the spell that I casted was cancelled midair. The wizard stared at me with a wary eye as he pointed his wand at me. I didn't know there was a wizard among the train passengers. "Whatever, since it's like this, you should die with them as well." What was with his words? He had been resolved to kill me from the start. I figured those guys were terrorists, and that whatever I said there wouldn't work. I took my watch out of my pocket and checked the time. 10 minutes had yet to pass since they started to attack. Is there still a little bit of time left? The scenery passing by outside was still cold and bleak. When I had seen it through the window, I had thought it was beautiful. But because the bulkhead wall in between disappeared, it had become quite scary. There was still some time before the train left Arret Mountain. It would be hard for the supporting troops to come right away. I have no choice. When I thought about the train's location and the time that had passed, I had at least 5 minutes left. But to hang in there. Chapter 4, Great Train Rain 2. Get out of the way. It's a disturbance. The wizards lined up while pushing the others who were blocking the entrance. They stared at the man who stood alone in compartment number 4 with a slightly strained look. He wore a black frock coat with golden embroidery thread over a neatly fitted suit. He had long black hair tied tightly around the back of his neck. He even had sharp eyes that felt colder than the chilly wind raging outside. Everything from his appearance to the energy that he radiated was unusual. In fact, their compatriots who had stormed from the rear of the train had been sent to the hereafter by his hands. Who the hell is this guy? The terrorist who led the train raid frowned at the man in front of him. He didn't think there would be a wizard like that on the train. Was it too late to find out who he was before they fought? No, I don't care what happened. We have 5 wizards here. They had recruited high-quality manpower knowledgeable in magic. Even if there were internal security personnel, they could be swept away with an overwhelming force. He didn't expect that there would be a wizard, but there was only one opponent. Even if he was outstanding, he would not be able to counterattack anymore since their side had 5 wizards. In addition, Mayhem, who could be called the leader among the wizards there, was a 4th-rank wizard. He'll never be able to counter unless he is a well-known wizard with at least 5 ranks. There were only a few wizards on the whole continent who were as capable as that. In particular, if he had achieved the 5th rank or higher at such a young age, rumors would have already spread. Then the highest rank he could be was 4. That was precisely equivalent to mayhem. Perhaps the man in front of him knew it, so he didn't use magic willingly. HMPH, there are 5 wizards, of course. It's surprisingly quick for you to concede, but it's still too late. Then I have no choice but to change my way of fighting a little bit. The man said so, then soon threw himself out of the wrecked train while the hem of his frock coat fluttered. Oh, Uo, did he just jump? Did he choose suicide because he knows he can't win? The terrorists were confused. One of the wizards stuck his head out over the broken bulkhead just in case, but nothing was seen under the distant cliff. I think he fell down and died. I thought he'd do something, but he was just a coward. The moment everyone was about to come to such a conclusion, whoosh. A flash pierced through the head of the wizard who was sticking out his head. The unbalanced body tilted forward and fell outside the train. WH what? Hansen is dead. Dead? Why, more than that, where did that flash come from? While everyone was confused, Mayhem, the leader of the wizards, frowned and looked up. On the roof. He's on the roof. On the train's roof. But didn't he jump outside a while ago? Did he use some flying magic? Is it possible to catch up with the running train and get on its roof with flying magic? Shut up and go after him? What a shame. I was going to take down another one after they let their guard down. There was a chaotic noise coming from below. Because they had found out I was alive, they were going to attempt to kill me with all their might. I had pretended to jump off the train, hung onto the wall, climbed up, and prepared to catch them off guard. I couldn't help but be satisfied by taking down one of the 5 wizards. Hurry and go up. Kill him? A voice rang in between both compartments, and soon they began to climb up the roof one by one through the ladder. But it wouldn't be that easy. I waited and fired a tangible magic power at them as they appeared, and then I turned my back before running toward the rear compartment. Those who were about to climb up had no choice but to go back down due to the attack that flashed across their heads, because a roof without shelter made them the target if they climbed it. Thump, 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 thump. As I ran with loud footsteps on purpose, the guys who were standing by in the compartment also heard the sound and chased me. To the back. He's heading back into the rear compartment. Chase him. It was so easy to get them to follow. It seemed that getting rid of that one wizard had made a quite big impact. Did it mean that even if each of them committed suicide and blew themselves up, it wouldn't be acceptable for their colleague to die at the hands of others? What a contradictory mindset. I'm the one who's more thankful if you come out so willingly like this. The more you do that, the easier it is for me to deal with all of you. The terrorists were split in half to catch the wizard who had fled to the rear of the train. Since their opponent was a wizard, it would be a hindrance if he wasn't fought by fellow wizards. Except for a few people who would assist the wizards, the rest of them decided to aim for the first class of compartment number 1 that had yet to be pierced. The wizard troops were heading to the rear as they were separated into 2 groups from compartment number 4. Damn it, where is he? What about our compatriots up there? Why aren't they saying anything? Anyway, let's go to the back. As soon as he led the group and hurriedly opened the door, boom! The door exploded, and a bright red flame engulfed the terrorists. In an instant, the 5 people turned into black charcoal and collapsed on the ground. The magical flame was extinguished like a candle after fulfilling its role faithfully. You wretch! I can't believe he set up a trap in front of the door. Mayhem, the wizard's leader, looked at the bodies of his dead compatriots and became silent. In that short time, he installed a spell trap in front of the door. The man's swiftness was astonishing, but what made Mayhem even tenser was the decisive action that he saw. Usually, the aristocratic wizards he knew were extremely reluctant to move their bodies because they had been weakened due to arrogance since their birth. Whenever they used magic, they spread out their spells as if they were showing it off, and others stood from their seats. But the man he was chasing wasn't like that. When his situation seemed to be disadvantageous, he immediately ran away and then lowered the opponent's guard and made a surprise attack. That can't be the way a normal wizard fights. He was extremely practical and thorough. Isn't that kind of move more similar to a mercenary or a hunter than a wizard? What the hell is he? At first, Mayhem had thought he was just a wizard who had killed his compatriots. After all, Most people on the train were aristocrats or wealthy merchants. They were all the ones who sucked the blood and sweat of poor commoners and stood on top of them. It should have been easy enough for them to kill one person. But he's different. What the hell is his true identity? Mayhem, who was getting concerned, opened his mouth with a heavier expression. Everyone, be careful. From now on, we take the lead. We don't know what kind of traps he might have installed, so move as carefully as you can. Yes. Led by Mayhem, the wizards took the lead in checking if there were any traps installed in the corridors or walls. As a result, they spent a considerable amount of time whenever they crossed the train's compartments. Don't be impatient. He can't get away from the rear of the train anyway. After all, he was like a rat in a trap. For the moment, it was obvious that he had fled to the rear compartment. Mayhem, the wizard's leader, walked slowly before he suddenly stopped. He felt an indescribable sense of wariness. He quickly realized why he suddenly felt so restless. Clang, Kriya-ack. There was a loud noise from the rear of the train. The slow-moving terrorists instinctively realized something was wrong when they heard the sound. Damn! The train separated, and he ran away. His rising anger had made him too late to realize. In the first place, his opponent didn't have to fight them. All he had to do was drag for time and run away. He had purposely set a trap to raise their alert and buy time. He was trying to escape safely by moving quickly to the last compartment. Chase him. Don't let him escape. They dropped their caution. They had no other intention than to chase and kill the wizard who had installed the traps and run away. They rushed throughout the train and soon arrived in the last compartment, number 12. As soon as they opened the door, all they saw was the snowy mountain range and railroad, not the view of compartment number 12, which was supposed to be there. Mayhem clenched his teeth. I made a mistake. I kept reminding myself that he didn't have to fight us. I overlooked an important fact because I was angry. Who would have expected that the opponent would run away with such determination? Damn it, did we lose him? That brat. I've remembered his appearance. We'll definitely find him and kill him. When everyone was staring outside with their teeth clenched like that, Mayhem felt a powerful wave of mana from behind and got goosebumps all over his body. What is this? He turned his head in a hurry and looked at his back. And what he saw was definitely the man who should have disappeared along with the separated compartment 12. Why is he here? But it wasn't the man's existence that mattered the most. The most important thing for him to pay attention to was the spell that was completed in front of him, almost on the verge of being activated. It was a very ferocious and dangerous kind of elemental magic. Everyone dodge, Mayhem shouted as he boosted as much mana as he could. With insufficient time to dodge, he raised his defenses as much as possible to create the strongest possible barrier of mana. Whirr! Shortly afterwards, a huge spell engulfed the entirety of compartment 11, sweeping the interior like a storm. It was a dazzlingly white flame. The flames had the same color as the blizzard that softly swirled outside. It swept away all the terrorists who had not yet been able to evacuate or respond. Is it over? I murmured as I watched the flame spell gradually disappear. They had been focused on thinking that I had run away with compartment 12. I'm sure they were. If I dug a trap, stalled for time, and disconnected the compartment in the meantime, anyone would think so, but it was also a trap. At first, I had run away, pretending to stall by making a surprise attack. My escape was also nothing more than a trick to deceive them in the end. It was also helpful that they were properly angry. Thanks to that, I had been able to control their movements and gather them in one place for an ambush. It looks like there are still some bastards left in the lead compartment. But I've dealt with all the wizards, so it doesn't matter. I was thinking so, but something rose from the rubble. So you've managed to survive. You damned. It was the wizard's leader who got up. At the last moment, he had saved his life by spreading a barrier and holding on behind it. But that was all. His physical condition was horrible enough, so he was only just clinging to life. He had blocked the attack, but maybe he couldn't completely block all of it, so his face was half melted and his whole body was burned. Even one of his arms was missing. Even just breathing seemed painful to him, so I decided to leave him alone because I thought he wouldn't be able to endure it for long anyway. Why on earth did you kill them? Don't you feel sorry for our fellow compatriots who work for the world? What? I was wondering what he was talking about, so I thought it was a new kind of bullshit. When I closed my mouth in confusion, he glared at me with an angry stare. Don't you feel sorry for the people who died by your hands? I originally thought you were crazy, but you're even crazier than I thought. What did you say? You're the ones who raided the train and killed all the passengers, so what are you talking about? That was why I was dumbfounded. Those guys had attacked the train and killed any passenger they had seen. He was treating me like a bad guy because his colleagues were dead, so I was honestly just annoyed. They were already cheap, so they deserved to die. Wasn't it you who tried to kill me in the first place? We already decided to kill each other, so why are you talking about what's wrong with me now? That's, if they couldn't kill me, they should die. You, who the hell are you? He gave up his argument and asked me about my identity, but I couldn't answer that. Because beyond him, I saw countless shadows flying toward us from the outside. Claring, a white flash of light sparkled through the widely open back door and split the wizard in half. Thud. A solid line was drawn from the top of his head to his groin, and as soon as the white shadow jumped over the wizard and landed on the ground, his body split apart and collapsed to both sides. Blood did not flow out of the body because the separated sides were frozen with white ice. Beyond the fallen body was the image of a female warrior with a waving white cape. Are you all right? When the woman looked back at me and asked me in a concerned tone, I answered with a nod. The pattern on her shoulder plate was the shape of a pure white eagle. It was a sign of the frontier night guards who were in charge of protecting the Empire. I hope you can feel at ease now. The frontier guards have arrived. Chapter 5, Cold Steel. I had clearly seen it. The sight of knights in white armor running through the snowfield and jumping onto the train one by one. It was a movement beyond a human being's capability. They were strong enough to catch up with running horses using their 2 legs and could break rocks with their strength. That's a knight for you. They were the knights in charge of the steepest parts of the Exilian Empire. It's the frontier guards of the Empire. Everyone, run away. Help me. Terrorist screams rang out everywhere. If the frontier guards, which consisted of elite members, stepped up, the results were obvious without even seeing the conclusion. It took less than a minute to end after the frontier guards stepped up. That's how the train raid ended. Is it over? Knights of the Cold Steel under the frontier guards. The name alone sounded like nothing, but each individual was a considerably competent knight, as it was made up of people operating in the rugged and cold Arret mountain range. I went back to cabin number 403, still looking fine. I plopped down on the seat I had sat on before the raid. The inside of the train was filled with gashes and soot everywhere as if to prove the fierce fight it had gone through. It had become like that because a defensive magic circle was engraved on it, but if it had been an ordinary train, it would have already derailed and fallen below that cliff. The robbers have all been suppressed, so please feel at ease, everyone. The train will arrive soon, so please wait a little longer. The knights were seen walking around the inside of the train to calm the survivors. In fact, even if they were survivors, they were all those who were in the first-class cabin, protected in the safest place. It was hard to find survivors in other cabins. No, it was more accurate to say that everyone else had been annihilated. It was a pity, even considering the small number of people on the train. But I'm glad we got rid of all the terrorists. The knights had killed all those bastards who had attacked the train. It was a very futile result after bringing a large number of wizards. I'm the one who killed the wizards. It was not the time for me to worry about it. The train was arriving at its destination soon. As we passed through the mountain range full of white snow, fresh plants and trees began to be seen here and there. The sheer ice mountain range disappeared, and it was replaced with a wide plain. And beyond the horizon, I could see Leathervelk, one of the metropolitan cities in the Exilian Empire. It's big. Even though it was still far away, the majesty of the city was so magnificent that anyone could see it at a glance. Tower-like buildings soared high into the sky, factory chimneys spewed out endless white smoke, and big flying boats paddled among the clouds colored by the sunlight. On the riverside throughout the city, there were many mechanical boats composed of clockwork and brass, and steamboats came and went quickly in between. It was the result of magical engineering, made possible by combining advanced mechanical engineering with magic. The civilization had achieved an age of technology akin to what was often called steampunk. It's not quite surprising now. Still, the strange feeling created by the culture shock caused by the memory of my past life could not be erased, no matter how hard I tried. I was quite surprised to find that I was born as a baby in this world after dying in an accident in my previous life. That was already 27 years ago. The years had seemed to pass by quickly. This world was a unique world in the age of what was commonly called the Victorian and Belle Epoque eras, with the addition of magic, non-human races, and monsters. It would be better if I had arrived in the world of one of the games that I had used to play, or one of the novels that I liked. This was a different world that didn't even exist in my memory. It had no connection to anything I knew. Are you all right? As I was sitting still in my seat and staring at my approaching destination, someone talked to me. When I turned my head, I noticed the neat black hair at the entrance of the half-destroyed cabin. Was it the night lady who had saved me? She was looking at me with a worried look. You might have been hurt by the terrorists a while ago. I shook my head right away. No, thanks to the help of the knights, I'm fine. I just had a little something to think about. Ah, I'm glad to hear that. Her look when she smiled as she stroked her chest with relief was reminiscent of blooming roses. Now that I think of it, she was quite a beauty. She had porcelain skin and white armor without blemishes, and her contrasting black hair further highlighted her strong image. She was a good person with no harsh personality. If she wasn't like that, there was no way she would have come and stayed with me just because she was worried about me. She seemed to have competence, as she had become a member of the Knights of Cold Steel, and since she looked young, that meant she had the talent. I was thinking that she lived in a different world than me. My name is Veronica DeVille. What about you? DeVille? I'd heard of the name before. It was said that DeVille was a prestigious family that produced many famous knights in the Empire. Chuo. The moment I wanted to say my name, the train blew its horn to announce its arrival. I naturally closed my mouth, and Veronica turned her head as she looked out the window. Oh, we've finally arrived at Leathervelk. The train slowed down and came to a complete stop at the train station. The train station over the window was crowded with people. Apparently, they had come to see the train after hearing that it had been attacked. They looked at the appearance of the partially destroyed train and chatted among themselves. The police stepped up and built walls to keep people away, and reporters were seen trying to reach the gap and get a scoop somehow. Just as expected of a big city, Leathervelk was crowded from the beginning. There are a lot of people, right? I think the news has already spread. It doesn't matter. It was none of my business anyway. My sadness was only that the train, which was supposed to be heading to the capital, had to stop at Leathervelk due to an unprecedented attack. However, there was no way to get a refund for the ticket I had already paid for, so I had to get off there for the time being. Kriok. At that moment, the door opened roughly and police in uniform rushed in. What's going on all of a sudden? Dear passengers, please wait in your seats and do not leave. We have something to check. What's going on? Veronica asked. Who are you? One of the officers asked her. My name is Veronica of the Knights of Cold Steel. I'd like to ask you what on earth is happening. Oh, so you were a Knight of Cold Steel. It's a pleasure meeting you. I'm Officer Rimluz from the Leathervelk Metropolitan Police Department. Yes, Officer Rimluz. I'm glad to see you. So what's going on? I heard there was a train raid on the border of the Arret Mountains before the train arrived. Yes, that's right. We took care of all the raiders. Thanks to the hard work of the Knights of Cold Steel, we received reports that all the bandits who attacked the train had been repelled, but there's something unclear about it. Something unclear. The words made me nervous. The situation was flowing strangely when I thought of it. There was something that had been bothering me. Although there was a wizard among the attackers, a magically protected magic engineering train should not have allowed an attack so easily. Yes, you're right. It's clear that this attack was done by someone not just from the outside, but by someone from the inside as well. Veronica widened her eyes in surprise. But then she nodded and agreed to the policeman's words. Such an assumption did not have any flaw in the first place. I'd actually encountered a guy who had disguised himself as a train employee, and those who'd removed the magic protections from the inside. Because of them, the terrorists could easily enter the train and passengers who were on board died. I don't know if you're already identifying the corpses. I'm just trying to identify the survivors inside because there might be people who were involved with the terrorists. There is no need to worry. We'll send back those who have been identified soon. Ah, I see. Veronica smiled with relief and looked back at me. Her smile was full of relief, but cold sweat was flowing hard behind my back instead. They're going to check my identity? And in a situation where I've taken off my camouflage mask, I touched my face calmly with my fingertips. Yeah, I'm sure it's not covered with a camouflage mask right now. I'm in trouble. I had boarded that train as Gerard, a wealthy merchant in his mid-40s. Obviously, a person named Gerard would be on the passenger list. That was fine, but the problem was with my face. How could anyone believe that my natural face without whiskers or wrinkles belonged to a man in his mid-40s? What should I do? I hadn't participated in the attack, and I was just a passenger that had been unjustly caught in the events, but I couldn't be confident that they'd believe me. Gerard was a fake identity to hide who I really was. A fake identity was a felony in any country. I would be lucky enough if I was just hanged, but if I was believed to have been involved in a suspected terrorist situation like that, it was likely that I'd be severely tortured. I wouldn't be falsifying my identity in the first place if I was a normal person. What should I do? Do I have to run away like this? There's no way running away is possible. There were knights of cold steel on the train, and there were even soldiers from the Empire outside the train in case of any contingency. The moment I tried to escape from there, my neck would fly away without even being able to endure for a minute. Running away was simply the worst choice. However, if I stayed still, they would be able to find out my real identity. I tried hard not to show my anxiety. Meanwhile, the police who brought the passengers' list documents handed over the papers. They were trying to check the people on the train one by one. What room were you in? He asked me. Room 403. Here's my ticket. I calmly took the train ticket out of my inner pocket and showed it to the policeman. He flipped through the papers as soon as he found out that the ticket was not fake. Let's see, number 403. Ah, here it is. 2 passengers stayed in this cabin. Ludger Chelisi, a man in his mid-20s, and Gerard, a man in his 40s. Then he raised his head and looked at me stealthily. It seemed like he was about to ask why I was alone when there were supposed to be 2 of us. What happened to the other one? He was swept away by the explosion that took place during the attack. He fell down the distant cliff in the Arret Mountains. They wouldn't even be able to find his body since he had fallen down the cliff of that horrifying mountain range. My words made the police show a more suspicious expression. I clenched my fist and I desperately held my poker face. I'll get caught. I'll get caught if it keeps on going like this. But even so, I couldn't think of a proper way to get out of that situation. There were a lot of police and soldiers outside. The police blockade was very strong. Running away? It's impossible in the first place. And the other problem was Veronica, the woman who was flapping her white cape in front of me. She was the woman who had cut the top of the terrorist's head in half just moments before. She had no hesitation in killing people. She was treating me with a smile for the time being, but the moment it turned out that I was shady, she would be the first one to draw her sword. Considering her ability to join the Knights of Cold Steel at a young age, she must have been even more intimidating than the cops outside the train. It was when all kinds of thoughts swirled inside my head. Veronica, who was watching the situation idly, stood by my side. Wait a minute, he's not a suspect in the first place. Pardon? He was fighting against the terrorists before the Knights of Cold Steel arrived. I saw it with my own eyes. He fought them? The policeman mumbled in disbelief and scrutinized the list again. Then he nodded as if he was convinced of something and looked back at me with an expression that changed in an instant. So Ludger Chelsea is alive, and Gerard was swept away by the explosion. Oh. No, wait a minute. What did he just say? The officer's expression, who was checking the list in more detail, was colored with astonishment. Oh, the newly appointed professor at the Surin Academy? What? He's a Surin professor, are you sure? Veronica opened her eyes wide at Officer Rimlouz's shout. Looking at the reaction of those two as though it was a scene in a comedy show, I realized what was happening. It was something unbelievable, but they believed that I was Ludger. It was sudden, but I made a quick decision. I immediately regained my composure and nodded. Yes, that's right. As I replied, I picked up the suitcase that Ludger had dropped before he died. I was glad that I had kept it just in case. I'm Ludger Chelsea. Chapter 6, False Identity 1. Photography had not yet been popularized in this world. Most photos only existed in black and white, and even then, the quality was not very good, so it was impossible to compare them in detail. When comparing people, it was inevitable that identification was only based on clothes, age, and overall physique. It was no wonder they were mistaken. I'm sorry, Mr. Ludger. I felt sorry for the dead, but that didn't mean I should also die, right? Living people should live. And Ludger's identity was very useful in escaping from that situation. Oh my God, you're the new professor at Surin Academy. As expected, the magic I saw back then. Veronica's tone toward me changed as soon as the name Surin was mentioned. She muttered something to herself too, I see. Did she see me when I was using magic? Maybe that had earned her trust all the more. Even the officer who had half suspected me when he was interrogating me immediately bowed to me. I'm sorry for the trouble. Please forgive me for being rude because of the situation. That's all right. While saying that, I thought to myself that the name Surin was really great indeed, the only magic academy that existed in the Empire. Even when considering the whole continent, the best academy was Surin. Surin's name was never to be taken for granted, and it was natural to be surprised to hear that I was a professor who taught the students there. I can't believe he's a Surin professor. At such a young age, he's awesome. The other guards and police also whispered among themselves. I decided to be more brazen about it since the situation had turned out like that anyway. At that moment, I was becoming Ludger Chelsea. We will accompany you on the way out. It's all right. No, you're the one who's going to nurture the future of the Empire, so how can we just let you go? You wasted your time because of us. It's all right, though. It's because we feel sorry. No, it's uncomfortable for me to move around with all of you. I couldn't shout it out loud, so I agreed with a cold expression. Miss Veronica, I'll be on my way. It was a short meeting, but it was nice to meet you. I sent my farewell to Veronica for the last time before I left. We had only met briefly, but I didn't think it was a bad fate. Maybe she felt the same way as she smiled and waved at me. Yes, Mr. Ludger. Let's meet again if fate brings us together once more. Well then, I'm sorry, but I don't think we'll see each other again. I was safely guided by the guards through the swarming crowd to the train station's exit. The exit was also crowded with people, perhaps because it was a train station where a lot of people came and went. I opened my mouth when I thought that it was the right time. I've come this far, so it's enough. I'll move on my own from here. I'll feel burdened if you do anything more than this. Oh, yes. Understood. Please be careful on your way. The guard saluted me and disappeared back into the station. As I sent a farewell to them with a light nod, I let out a sigh using all the strength in my shoulders. I had almost gotten into trouble. I was glad that they misunderstood me for a moment. Otherwise, I would have been caught with a fake identity and accused of being an accomplice in terrorism. But I was sure that it'd be okay now that I had passed the critical situation. Are you Mr. Ludger Chelsea? At that moment, I felt my blood freezing at the voice right behind my back. I had not felt a presence from the voice's owner. When I turned my head slowly and looked behind, an old gentleman in a rather modest posture was looking at me. Yes, that's right. Who are you? I answered smoothly as I was calming my surprised heart. Greetings. My name is Wilford, and I'm an employee of Surin Academy. I'm here to meet Mr. Ludger. to meet me, you said? Yes, I heard that the train was attacked. I came here in a hurry just in case something happened, but I'm glad you look all right. Wilford said so and opened the door to the wagon he had brought along. Now, please get in. I'll accompany you to Surin. I rolled my eyes. Can I say that he got the wrong person here? I didn't know how long that old man named Wilford was there. But since he was convinced that I was Ludger, he must have seen me part ways with the officer. It was practically impossible to say I was not Ludger and refuse his offer there. Most of all, when he first appeared, I couldn't feel any presence. He was a keen elderly man who had come out subtly after hiding well. That man, he was absolutely not a normal employee. Sure, I had no other choice but to get into the wagon. Veronica, the vice-captain of the Knights of Cold Steel, recalled Ludger, who had just left the train, Ludger Chelsea. From the first time she saw him, she thought he was an extraordinary person, because she had seen it, his appearance when he had swept away the terrorists with a white flame. Other knights might not have been able to see it well because they were far away, but she had certainly seen it with her own eyes, and she had confidence that her eyes were better than her captain's. Even though his opponents were also wizards like him, Ludger had knocked such men down without a single scratch or wound. The man's behavior was so natural, as if it was something obvious. Even when she had brutally killed the terrorist with her own hands, Ludger's face had showed not the slightest bit of change. It wasn't the reaction of a man who was frozen in fear. Ludger, that man had observed the whole situation with a cool head. He wasn't an ordinary person. A simple-looking yet luxurious black frock coat with a neat suit and golden thread embroidered over it. He had a silent impression and a serious look in his eyes. His slightly pulled-back long hair, tied in at the back of his neck. When she had looked at him closely, he was a charming young man with a sharp impression. What stimulated her concerns the most was the vigor that subtly radiated from Ludger. At first, I thought he was a royal family member who had hidden his identity. The grace that had flowed subtly from Ludger was similar to what Veronica felt when she was confronted with someone who had a noble status in the imperial family. So when she heard that Ludger was a newly appointed professor at Surin Academy, she was convinced that he could do that. No, rather than that, she even thought that the reputable name of Surin was not enough to be a medal for such a man. No one is surprised that fish swim well and birds fly across the blue sky. It was the same for Ludger to hold a position in Surin. It was so obvious that she was convinced of it right away. Her intense déjà vu became a certainty when she heard the name, Ludger Chelsea. She had heard of him. A young wizard who had recently gained a reputation. He had achieved the 4th rank at the youngest age, submitted 12 theses to the Magic Tower, and even redefined one of its challenges, the Lancaster formula. In addition, it was said that he had been appointed as an officer in the military, and he had even made a great contribution in a battle by hunting cryptid. He said he's going to be appointed as Surin's professor this time, right? If so, she was curious. It just so happened that her younger sibling attended Surin. If she had a chance later, she should ask her younger sibling, "How does he teach his class?" My plan to run away as soon as I left the train station was disrupted from the start. I hadn't expected the academy to send someone to pick me up. I thought it was out of line, but it was understandable when it came to Surin Academy. Any professor who was going to the best academy in the Empire would have special treatment wherever they went. I'm sure Surin was worried because such a high-level employee was caught up in the terrorist attack. I understood why they would send a person to serve me in a convenient manner. This is a big problem. I looked inside the wagon. There were fluffy red chairs with fancy patterns around them. It was a wagon that I could only think of as luxurious, no matter how I looked at it. Even with how fast it moved, it only shook slightly. The thing pulling the black wagon was a steamy, horse-shaped golem. I was so amazed to see the results of the latest magic engineering, made by a mixture of machine and magic. Most of all, the old gentleman, Wilford, who was driving the wagon, was also quite special. It was because I didn't feel any sense of presence until he had gotten close to me. Besides, he was dressed in neat attire and had a sturdy body that his clothes couldn't conceal. One of the probabilities is that he was once a knight. Knights didn't decline just because they got older. On the contrary, an old knight had to be more vigilant. They had superhuman bodies and years of experience on top of that. It was crazy to run away thoughtlessly in that kind of situation. If I try to leave here with an excuse, he'll obviously be suspicious. I can't sneak away, and even if I succeed in running away, I'd be chased as soon as they received a report. Various other problems were also scattered in my mind. First of all, it was about the identity of Gerard that I had used previously. It was necessary to create a new identity because that fake identity was practically killed and done with, and it was obvious that the process would cost a lot of money and time. What I needed was not a formal route, but a criminal underworld. I would also have to gather information in the backstreets of a city I was visiting for the first time and find a place to stay until I created a new identity. Having lost my once existing identity, I was no better than an illegal immigrant. Having no identity was no different from having no civil rights. In other words, no one would recognize me even if I was dragged somewhere and died without anyone knowing. After considering all those possibilities, I decided to give up running away for the moment. I had to save myself first and foremost. Let's not do anything that will make them suspicious for now. First, let's just go to Surin Academy. It wouldn't hurt to think about what to do afterwards from there. Clip-clop. Clip-clop. When the fast-running wagon slowed down, I felt that I had finally arrived at Surin Academy. As if to prove my assumption, the front window of the wagon swung open to the side, then Wilford spoke to me. Mr. Ludger, we've arrived. Wilford's words made me stare at the view outside the window. The first thing I saw was a magnificent and huge gate, and beyond that was a vast expanse of land. The road where the wagon traveled was neatly and nicely paved, and green trees were evenly planted on the left and right, adding sophisticated beauty. Surin Academy's buildings, which were standing under the dazzling sunlight, shone brightly. That's the main building, that's the villa, that's the park, and that's the auditorium. I think, apart from the large scale of each building, I couldn't even guess exactly how vast the land was. Isn't this larger than a decently sized city? The guard who was guarding the main gate opened the door immediately and gave me a light bow. As I passed through the main gate, I could see how much magic power existed nearby. How many layers of magic circles were stacking up to the point that their original shape couldn't be seen anymore. Crazy? There wouldn't be a case of a sturdy bastard breaking in through the front door, but if there was, they would become dust and disappear in a second. Clip-clop. Clip-clop. The place where the steel horse that was leading the wagon stopped was a building that existed farther inside from the main building. It was a majestic castle that looked as if it was a tall crown. This is the place. Let's disembark. Wilford stopped me when I tried to grab my luggage. We'll be back anyway, so you don't have to carry your luggage. All right. After getting out of the carriage, I followed Wilford through the fountain and past the beautiful stone statues into the building. The interior was spectacular. The light that was shining from the window spread gently as it was reflected far into the building interior, creating a cozy color and gently warming up the skin. From somewhere unseen, a fragrant smell stimulated my nose, and I could hear sounds of birds chirping. It felt as if I was dreaming. The interior was a sophisticated yet neat design that looked like a piece of beautiful architecture from medieval Europe. If the neighboring city of Leathervelk had a steamy steampunk atmosphere, the academy was much more fantasy-oriented. Ha ha ha. Kid, don't do that. As I walked up the stairs following Wilford, the employees and students in academy uniforms passed by me. Every time that happened, I could hear whispers from behind my back. Don't tell me they're gossiping about me because I look like a country bumpkin. I felt bothered for some reason, so I occasionally tidied up my clothes or arranged my hair. Before I knew it, I had arrived in front of a big elevator. I'm going to get on this way. I got on the elevator with Wilford. I had thought the building was tall enough when I saw it from the outside, but I was surprised once again to see that it had almost 30 floors. I finally thought that it was really the scale of an empire's academy. When the elevator arrived at its destination, the door opened, and there was a long, red-carpeted corridor with a wooden door at its end. "The principal is waiting for you. I'll be staying here. Thank you for your guidance. There's no need to mention it. It's my job." I crossed the corridor and stood in front of the door of the principal's office. As soon as I raised my hand and was about to knock on the door, a drowsy and attractive voice could be heard from the inside. "Come on in." I opened the door and went inside. "Nice to meet you." The woman who was sitting at the desk with her back to the window greeted me. She was the principal of Surin Academy. Considering that she could only sit there if she was at least a 6th-rank lecturer among the existing 8 ranks, she was unquestionably a first-class wizard. Looking at her appearance, she looked like she was in her mid-20s. Maybe she had been organizing some documents, as she loudly put down the fountain pen that she held in her right hand and stared at me. Her white hair that flowed down like a curtain shone even more brightly with the light from the window behind her back. She had two-tone hair. The outside of her hair was white, and the inside of her hair was a subtle pink. "What is it?" The moment her golden eyes stared at me, I felt an indescribable feeling. In the depths of my soul, I felt the beauty of her figure. I tried to ignore the strange sensation and spoke in a firm voice. "I'm Ludger Chelsea. I'm here because you summoned me. For now, I'm Ludger Chelsea." Chapter 7, False Identity 2. The outside of her hair was white. The inside of her hair was a light pink color that resembled cherry blossoms. She was a beauty with peculiar two-toned hair. The principal accepted my greeting with a bright smile. "Yes, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Ludger. Moreover, are you feeling all right? I heard you were involved in a terrorist incident." "It's nothing much. I was helped by the Knights of Cold Steel at a dangerous moment." "Oh my, that's a relief. I was pretty panicked, too. It's been a long time since we've chosen a new teacher, so I was worried that you got hurt. If that happened, we wouldn't be able to save our face, right?" Seeing that she openly talked about saving her face, she certainly didn't seem to have an ordinary personality. Well, indeed. Anyone who had climbed up to a high position was bound to be twisted somewhere. Even more so when they were a wizard. My teacher was like that as well. The same went for the woman in front of me. It didn't surprise me much. "You're not feeling sick anywhere by any chance, are you?" Looking at the principal staring at me with a subtle smile, I wondered if she had noticed something odd about me. Come to think of it, has the principal met Ludger before? Then wouldn't she notice that he changed? Her voice dragged me back as anxious thoughts ran through my mind. "I've only seen you through paper. It's my first time seeing you in person. You're pretty tall and decent, I see." Fortunately, it seemed to be the first actual meeting between Ludger and the principal. "Thank you for your compliment, even if it's just empty words." I replied with an inward sigh of relief. "No, they're not empty words. I think the students will show a passionate reaction when the semester starts, right? You are such a handsome man." "I'm flattered." "Well, take this for now." The principal held out a piece of paper to me. "We already informed you in advance, but it will be better for you to confirm the contract thoroughly. The contract is for 2 years. The salary is written there. Keep in mind that the accommodation is provided." I accepted the contract and looked through the contents carefully. I didn't think much of the contract because I was planning to quit quickly and go out as soon as my backup identity came out anyway. Until I read what was written inside. Oh, what? Wait a minute. What was written in the contract was so surprising that it even made me widen my eyes in surprise. A month's salary is 30 coins of imperial gold. An imperial gold coin is equal to 1 million denars, the continent's common currency. In other words, 30 imperial gold coins meant 30 million denars, and it was nearly 300 million won, $233,814, in terms of the Earth's currency where I lived. It was just a month's salary. The monthly salary was 300 million won, $233,814. At that point, I had to wonder if I actually had to sell off my organs, but it was Surin Academy. It was the best magic academy in the Empire. Even on the Earth where I lived, the annual salary of an experienced professor at a Gangnam University was up to 10 billion won, $7,790,559. It was quite possible. And there's a bonus for each semester and a bonus at the end of every year. What's more, I can even raise my salary based on my performance, you said. If the student's evaluation of their teacher is good, it will be raised, you said. I could take a bonus without much trouble, and if so, the annual salary would be more than 500 million denars. My contract period was 2 years, so if I added it up, it was more than 1 billion denars. With that money, I could live quite well off anywhere. I could even do a side job with their permission. Gulp. I swallowed without realizing it. It was amazing that the salary was so much, but the amount of support funds for when the class was starting was huge. There was also the fact that more funds might be dispersed depending on the teacher's evaluation. In addition, I would have a separate house and eat here, so I didn't have to spend money unless for some special occasions. If I last here for 2 years, I'll get 1 billion denars. In terms of Earth currency, it's worth 10 billion won, and even that's just the minimum wage. If I do well, I can raise my salary and extend it after the contract is over. It was a condition that could only be considered crazy. This is the best academy in the empire, they said. What on earth is the life I've lived so far? What do you think? Is it all right? This is not bad. It's not only a not bad level. This is amazing. And hella amazing at that. I took a deep breath and read the contract again. As expected, it wasn't a dream. It was like hitting a whole jackpot unexpectedly. But there was a fundamental problem. It's true that Surin is great enough to give this amount of money, but at the same time, I have a lot of burden as a Surin teacher. Will I be able to endure this position? Will I be able to work properly as a teacher here, a place where a breadth of all kinds of geniuses exists? No way. It would be a miracle if my lowly self wasn't revealed in a day. Still, I was confident in babbling and bluffing. I had been growing up in an environment where I could die if I didn't do that. I analyzed the situation quickly. It's alluring, just looking at the annual salary, but it's also quite burdensome. But because I'm already here, I can't say no. Ludger was already supposed to become a teacher here, and I became Ludger Chelsea. How could I say no in that situation? My appointment as a teacher had already been confirmed, so I couldn't suddenly say that I wouldn't do it. Then, of course, they'd be suspicious. In fact, the answer I had to give was already determined. Then I have no choice but to do it. I was then determined to utilize the identity of Ludger Chelsea. I only had to stay there for 2 years with my eyes closed. Yes, in 2 years I can end this life. Isn't it better than the army because they pay me a lot of money, and I am free to move? It made me feel at ease to think about that. I handed the contract to the principal and opened my mouth. Deceiving, bluffing, and finding the right atmosphere. That's my specialty. I've checked everything in the contract details. Good, then let's take good care of each other from now on, Mr. Ludger. Yes, I look forward to your kind cooperation, sir. I shook hands with the principal, who smiled at me. It was a secret that I was sweating hard to keep my poker face, because I thought the corners of my mouth would be twisted after meeting with the principal. I followed Mr. Wilford, who was waiting outside, to my assigned accommodation. Should I say that it was befitting of Surin Academy all the way? Even the buildings dedicated to teachers on the land looked expensive. I couldn't believe that my house was a 2-story house that was similar to what I had seen in fairy tales. We still have 3 weeks until the semester starts, so you can rest until then. Mr. Wilford disappeared into his wagon after he said so. Even when he left, he was a man who did not forget his disciplined attitude, so he could be said to be an example of a gentleman. Shall I go? I went into the house with a suitcase. I could feel it when I saw it from the outside, but it felt very different when I went inside. The furniture was decorated with all sorts of things, and there was not a single speck of dust, as it seemed to have been maintained constantly. When I checked the bathroom just in case, it was amazing. The bathroom, which was covered with white tiles, looked like it wouldn't be out of the norm for aristocrats to use. Hot water came out well, and there was even a bathtub where I could take a bubble bath. It was understandable that this was a world in which the magical revolution took place. Thud. After checking every corner of the house, I dropped down as I lay on a soft sofa. From now on, I'm an academy teacher, right? A lot of things happened that day. I was caught up in terrorism unintentionally, misunderstood as someone else, and even happened to come to Surin Academy to work as a teacher. I was amazed at how things were turning out, but since I'd gone that far, I couldn't even run away. If I suddenly disappear now, they're going to ask around about Ludger, and since my real face has been seen, there won't be any place for me in the Empire. It was potentially fatal that my real face had been sold, not my face in disguise. In the end, I had no choice but to act as Ludger Chelsea. At that moment, phew, this is tough. It had already been 27 years since I came to this world. I was reincarnated in this world with no special abilities and just the memories of my past life. However, my parents' existence in my life after reincarnating was so dramatic that I had to survive on my own. At the same time, it was a strange life in which I had overcome death several times by being embroiled in all kinds of incidents. For me, that situation was just confusing. I happened to become an academy teacher, and it was also in Surin Academy, the best in the Empire. I wonder if I could simply call it as it just happened. This is actually a fake job. I didn't even do it on purpose, but I had gotten a fake job. But I couldn't quit either. It was the so-called riding the tiger. The moment I got off, I would be eaten by the tiger. That was the situation I found myself in. It was a fight between me, who might fall down and be eaten by the tiger, and the tiger, who might get tired of me first. Yes, 2 years. I just have to endure it for 2 years. That's enough. I still needed a new identity anyway. Ludger's identity in that situation was very alluring. Ludger Chelsea was a man who traveled to the Empire far from his home. He wouldn't run into anyone who knew him there. Even so, I decided to find out more about Ludger, just in case. I went up to the bedroom on the 2nd floor with Ludger's suitcase. When I entered the room, I shut the curtain by the window and looked inside the room carefully. It was to search for possible external surveillance. There's nothing in my way. I thought everything was fine, so as I was about to open the suitcase, clack. HM? What's this? The suitcase is locked. I checked the leather suitcase in detail. Looking closely, a fine magic circle was imprinted on the metal lock. This is a security magic. It was not large in size, so I didn't know that a magic circle with a high level of difficulty, which required detailed magic manipulation, would be engraved in such a place, as expected of a teacher who's assigned to Surin Academy. Taking a step away from the suitcase, I wondered what to do with it. I didn't give up, but I was figuring out how to open it. It would be convenient if I have reagents, but I've already sent away my former luggage in advance, so I'll have to use another method. I picked a moderate towel and wet it immediately. After leaving the wet towel by my side, I took a stick and started a small fire at the tip of it. It was pyro, a basic spellcasting of elementary magic. It was only about the size of a lighter flame, but its heat was considerable. I put the fire on the tip of the stick to the lock of the suitcase. The hot heat began to heat the brass. A few minutes later, as soon as the brass heated up and turned red, I pushed a wet towel onto the brass. The heated metal cooled quickly with the sound of water evaporating. Soon after, the lock was distorted, and the magic circle engraved on it was also twisted. Of course, that did not eliminate the effect of the magic circle. Magic isn't that easy. But it's the moment when I can make a gap in a solid wall. Right then. I didn't miss the short moment and shot my mana sharply through the center of the magic circle. It was an important part of the magic circle. What I was doing could be called hacking. Whoosh, I did it. When I broke it, the effect of the magic circle disappeared. At the same time, the lock opened with a click. It's a piece of cake to open this. It was not uncommon for someone to imprint a magic circle or barrier on suitcases. Most wizards are very sensitive to security, so security magic is close to basic knowledge. If they couldn't perform it, they'd even ask their acquaintance or company to professionally imprint the magic circle for them. If you tried to forcibly remove the security magic in such a case, a spell would be invoked to get rid of the contents. It was the manifestation of an extreme ideology that's a characteristic of wizards that they'd get rid of their items before revealing them to someone else. However, in order to safely lift the security magic, it's necessary to analyze how the spell was implemented. Of course, The process took a very long time, and I couldn't afford it because I was in a hurry. So I chose to do that method. It was a method that was close to a cheating trick that didn't necessarily require me to analyze the spell. It's enough to know where the magic is carved and what it's made of. Usually, strong metal is the mainstream material where the magic circles are carved. No one can engrave magic circles all over their leather bag. Leather is very inefficient as a medium for transmitting magic power. It was the same for clothes and papers. Except for parchment made by peeling the bark of the magic wood, it was impossible to engrave magic circles or barriers on clothes or papers unless you were at least an archmage with 6th rank or higher. On the contrary, it is metal that has good conductivity of magic power. The most popular metals for it are iron and brass. The materials that were better than those were silver, gold, and platinum. The best material is jewelry made from gemstones, but the materials themselves are so expensive that they are not used unless you are from high-ranking nobles. Obviously, low-priced iron or brass was the most commonly used, and I was fully familiar with the methods of invading the two materials. It was a method of heating and expanding the metal engraved with the magic circle, and then quickly cooling it with cold water to shrink it again. The magic circle carved on the metal would deviate and twist during the expansion and contraction of the metal. Even after the deviation, the magic circle would recover automatically as though it wasn't a big problem. But the gap that existed at that moment was a very fatal flaw. At that moment, I sharply shot my mana, destroying and canceling the magic circle's core technique. I'm glad it worked. Well, it's not a commonly known method. It was just a trick made by applying scientific knowledge appropriately. Most wizards are people who are hung up on history and tradition, so they often look down on science. As a result, it was common for them not to prepare for this method, and that was what I wanted. If he was a real nut, he would have carried an iron suitcase covered in magic circles. Fortunately, Ludger Chelsea didn't go that far. I opened the suitcase and checked its contents. This is Chapter 8 False Identity 3. There was nothing surprising inside Ludger's suitcase, just some clothes and books. Other than that, there were also some documents and miscellaneous items. I thought there would be something greater. I put the textbooks, magic books, and theses together as one, then put them aside, and I sorted away the clothes appropriately. In addition to magic books, there were many other books, such as popular novels and essays by famous scientists. He really read all sorts of things. Other items were some letters, identification cards, and personal belongings. Even though they were his belongings, there was only a small pipe to be used as a portable pocket watch or magic medium, and a wallet containing money. I checked his identification card and documents one by one. Ludger Chelsea? A man from a fallen aristocracy of the northern continent's small kingdom of Quioden. He doesn't have any siblings and his parents are both dead. It's not bad. Although he was a fallen aristocrat, he would not be greatly insulted anywhere because he had a nominally aristocratic title, and there was no one to recognize him because he had no family. Let's see, it's an extremely fancy record. He submitted 12 theses to the magic tower, and he was the youngest wizard who climbed to 4th rank. He even served as a military officer, as expected of a Surin teacher. I didn't expect that he would have such a record at a young age. Is he teaching magic casting and its following as a specialized subject? So the main subject is mana release and elemental attributes. Given that magic casting was a specialized subject, there was a high probability of me teaching actual combat in the subject. I opened the letter and looked at its contents. If there were any conversations with his acquaintances, I had to catch his small habits and learn them. There's not much in the letter. Letters that were believed to have been exchanged with his acquaintance only consisted of formal conversations such as his soon-to-be appointment at the academy, book recommendations, or what happened somewhere. I don't think there was anyone he was close to when he was serving in the military. Did he have the style of a nerd student? Given that there was little personal content, he didn't seem to be that close to the person he exchanged letters with. What's left now is to go over the fundamental contents of the subject to teach to the students after the semester started, and the information about how Surin Academy was and how it worked. For the moment, it was necessary to travel around the land and learn the topography of Surin. Gurgle, gurgle. As I was about to go outside right away, I had no choice but to pause at the loud sound from my stomach. Come to think of it, I haven't eaten anything since I got off the train today. Let's start tomorrow. I'm mentally exhausted because so many things happened today. Let's eat first and rest well today. 2 weeks passed after that. In the meantime, I had been walking around every corner of Surin Academy to understand the geography of the place. As I expected when I first saw it, the enormous land of Surin Academy was simply beyond my imagination. People didn't think highly of Surin for no reason. I sat on an outdoor bench in a quiet cafe and enjoyed the peaceful scenery. I had finished checking the rough picture of it, so I was only thinking about the upcoming classes. Is it because it's almost time for the school to start? I see students more often. Students in Surin Academy's uniform were seen walking around. The uniform design looked cool for boys and pretty for girls. It was said to be a uniform made by a prestigious designer in the Empire. Perhaps because it was an academy that taught magic, some of the students flew on brooms or moved on strange mechanical dolls. I thought it was a good time to see young people laughing and talking to each other. Every day had been a fierce war since I came to this world, and such children live their blessed lives thanks to their natural talents and environment. 2 female students who passed by peeked at me and began to whisper among themselves. Well, if I spotted someone I hadn't seen before school started, I'd be suspicious as well. I took a sip of coffee while being unnecessarily self-conscious of my surroundings. I should go back to the accommodation after drinking it all and prepare for the orientation in a week. As soon as I was about to get up after drinking all the coffee that was left while thinking about it, a woman walked up to the table next to me and sat down naturally. The moment I thought she was just a new customer, she spoke to me in a small voice that only I could hear. "I'm glad you're safe. Why didn't you contact us for 2 weeks?" My instinctive intuition stopped me as my head was about to turn around unconsciously. Tap, I naturally put the empty cup on the table. Is she talking to me? I looked around. If I responded when she didn't even talk to me but to someone else, what could be more embarrassing than that? But no matter how much I looked around, there were no other people in my surroundings. There was no sense of presence either. The only people sitting at the outdoor table were the woman sitting next to me and me. It means she is talking to me. Or would it be more accurate to say that she talked to me? She continued speaking as I remained silent. "I was worried that you encountered some troubles. The other members are also wondering what happened to Mr. First Order." Members, First Order, someone who was worried about me at the first meeting. I couldn't know the details of the situation by that alone, but I could only be sure of one thing: I'm in a lot of trouble now. What? I fiddled with the handle of the coffee cup in my hand. I had just been drinking coffee while enjoying the atmosphere at the outdoor table of the cafe, but suddenly, a strange woman had come up to me and talked to me. Everything she said to me was unusual. She spoke to me about members of something in a polite tone that regarded me highly. A mentally ill person? No, she was being honest. Then did she find the wrong person? No, she found the right one. She was there to see a man named Ludger Chelsea, not me. As soon as I understood the situation, my mouth moved naturally, as if it was a well-polished gear. I had some things to check for a while. Do you mean something in connection with the terrorist incident? It was just an accident. No one knew that the rebel forces would attack the train where Mr. First Order was in. The other things as well. I need to find out the overall information about Surin. Didn't you receive any information in advance? That's not enough. There's a big difference between what I only hear and what I actually see. I see. The woman nodded her head as she was seemingly convinced. Whatever. I let my mouth run its course. Then did you take care of your duty well? Yes, of course. I've completed all the assassinations of the Academy's key figures before I came in here, even though most of them were employees. What? Assassinate the Academy's key figures? I almost jerked for a moment, but I managed to hold it in. And in the meantime, a traitor was found in the organization, so I took care of it. What? Traitor? Taken care of, I swallowed without realizing it when she told me about a traitor. Disposal, huh? How did you do it? I asked without showing my confusion. They pulled out their limbs and crammed them into their mouths. The rest of their torso was fed to wild dogs. I didn't see it myself, but I heard it from other members. We can say that it's the appropriate death for a traitor. They were crazier than I thought. However, my mind became calmer in that kind of situation. As the surrounding air sank heavier, I could feel the woman sitting next to me shivering. I'm sorry. I should have seen it myself and reported it. Forget it. Why did you suddenly come to find me? That. They said Mr. First Order came here, and we haven't heard from you in the last 15 days. So you moved on your own at this important moment? I was analyzing the situation while I was talking. She called me First Order, not Ludger. Given that First was in front of the name, it was highly likely for him to hold a quite high position within the organization. I trusted that, and tried to bluff a little, and I guess that was the right answer. Heek, I'm sorry. Be quiet. Do you want the people around us to be suspicious? I replied in a cold voice to the woman who was about to bow her head to me. HMP, so sorry. Don't even say sorry. Yeah, it's already time to check it out anyway. How many members are gathered now? Pardon. How many of our members are here? She looked around as much as she could and spoke with a low voice. Currently, 31 members of Third Orders and 7 members of Second Orders have been successful in hiding here, and the other First Order came in first as planned and is already settled down. That's enough. While nodding curtly, I sifted through the information I had gathered as much as I could. I have noticed that there is one more person named First Order besides me, and that there are almost 40 of them. Although they are not large in number, their ability must have been extraordinary, as they were able to plant this many people in Surin. Fortunately, this woman in front of me doesn't even question my identity. Rather, she showed me fear and respect as well as the sight of amazement in the meantime. As expected, Mr. First Order. It seemed obvious that she was thinking so. Looking at her like that, at least I could use something in order to gain something else. I see. I'm done checking, so I'll get up now. Oh, you can come to the designated place for our secret meeting later on. A meeting place. There was a place like that too, but there's no way I could ask a question like, where is it, right then? While I was thinking about what to do with it, a good idea came to me. Come, did someone like you just talk to me about coming or not? I deliberately lowered my voice and gave her a cold look, and I could see her face turning pale. That bluff might have worked properly, as she shook her body like a baby squirrel and desperately made excuses. That's not it. I'm just... I don't want to hear excuses. If you need a secret meeting in the future, I will be the one to decide. The same goes for the place and time. Do you understand? You understood? If there's anything you really need to tell me, I'll only allow it if I was called for by a First Order like me or higher than that. If it's higher, then is it from the Zero Order? So there's a Zero Order. I had said it just in case, but I was right. Yeah, don't bother me with trivial things other than what that person said. Do you understand? This is a warning. In other words, I'm telling you to behave well. I said so and got up from my seat. I was about to leave without looking back, but she called me from behind. I stopped in my spot and turned my head slightly to stare at her. What? How are you going to call us? The moment I heard it, I realized something. Come to think of it, I didn't explain anything to her properly, but I can't tell her something that I also don't know right away. Do I have to say it myself? And no, I made a slip of the tongue. I'll let it slide this time. At the end of my sentence, I walked out of there in quick steps, thump, thump, thump. Upon returning home, I hurried up to the bedroom on the second floor and took out the suitcase I had put in the closet. After scattering the letters in Ludger's suitcase on the bed one by one, I realized that my anxious imagination eventually became a reality. Damn it. The strange sense I felt while reading the letters. Why did they have to exchange letters in such formal words to an acquaintance who had no family? Why did a man with such a splendid record withdraw himself from his own private life to the point where it was close to misophobia? All those questions were finally answered. These weren't normal letters in the first place. I scanned special sentences of some specific words that were written inside the letters. The strange sense that I felt instinctively was that there was a certain pattern to those sentences. Right, it was a cipher. Their own cipher that they used to keep themselves from getting caught by the others. Throwing away the letters, I reread his identification papers. He's a fallen aristocrat. He doesn't have a family. And, what's more, he's from a small foreign country that's very far from the empire. The whole thing was fake. Even the fancy records of his past were all lies. The existence of Ludger Chelsea was an identity created by someone who spent a lot of their time on it. Why didn't I know? Why didn't I doubt it? Why did I naturally accept such an overly ideal identity? Then, the Ludger I met on the train. He was a member of the secret society that hid in Surin Academy. He was even an executive who had the title of First Order. And now, I'm wearing his mask. As I lost the strength of my legs, I flopped onto the bed. Crazy. The identity of Ludger Chelsea that I thought was ideal for starting a new life was actually a dangerous nuclear bomb, more dangerous than any other ones. I'm totally screwed. Chapter 9, Fake Job 1. I laid absent-mindedly in bed for nearly an hour. I didn't have the energy to do something right away. At that point, I felt it was unfair. No, how can an executive in a secret society get involved in a train attack and die? If he was a secret society executive who planted nearly 40 people in Surin Academy, he should have survived in that situation. Ha! Yes, I know. Even if I got angry like that, a dead person wouldn't come back. I had to admit it. I'm now Ludger Chelsea, and I have to hold on for 2 years while maintaining this damn identity. To be frank, I thought it wouldn't be difficult, and that it didn't matter as long as I was not caught by the academy. Still, I thought I could imitate a teacher's behavior pretty well because I had a related experience in my past life. Because I could use magic, and I didn't lack theoretical knowledge. Believing I could spend about 2 years without difficulty was a conviction that was thoroughly calculated and not reckless bravado. But that wasn't right. I couldn't believe he was in a secret society, moreover an executive. Besides, according to the conversation I had with her, they're not some ordinary dangerous people. The assassination of some of the Academy's key figures, dealing with a traitor? Their method is also quite brutal. Even the gangsters and mafias in the dark part of the earth wouldn't go that far. Wasn't it an extreme move that only some bad people would do? Isn't it too much to create an inflation in the difficulties by adding a new mission? In other words, it went from normal mode to hellish mode. Let's think. Now I have one more target to be aware of if I want to keep this false identity from being revealed. The Academy and an unidentified secret society. If either of those two communities caught me red-handed that I was not Ludger, I would be dead meat right away. Whether it was by the hand of the principal, or the Empire's law, or by the purging of the secret society itself, death was closer to me than ever. I have to think. Ludger Chelsea was an executive of the secret society. Ludger was also a made-up identity, so it might be an alias, but anyway, he was in a position that was commonly referred to as the First Order. Among the members of the secret association that had penetrated the Academy, there were only 2 First Orders, including me. I didn't need to know what their purpose was at the moment. The important thing was to find out who the other First Order was. I couldn't ask it directly, so there was no way to know right away unless they approached me themselves and held a secret meeting with me. For now, I can ignore the Second and Third Orders. I assumed the real Ludger to have been quite an ill-tempered character within the syndicate. Although I had only lowered my voice and bluffed a little, it was possible to infer from the expression of his subordinate who had become pale. Since he had a trash personality, she wouldn't irritate him for the most part as his subordinate. That was well welcomed by me. In the end, I only had to pay attention to one executive, another First Order, which was equivalent to Ludger's status. The problem was figuring out who the First Order was. I can't ask about it brazenly. No matter how distant they are, there is no way executives don't know each other. If I do that, I'll immediately garner some suspicion. I had to deal with the existence of a secret society that was lurking in the Empire and not only the Academy and Empire. I thought I was riding only one tiger, but I couldn't believe I was riding two tigers. I thought I was an amazing guy. Even a circus athlete wouldn't do that kind of thing. As soon as either side went awry, I'd be over with. The moment the balance collapsed, I was to be considered dead. Yeah. Now that it's like this, I have no choice but to do it. I immediately took out the books in the suitcase and opened the letters within them. First of all, I have to gain some information. This letter must be a secret cipher used by their organization. Then it was necessary for me to interpret it. There is a fixed pattern in every cipher, and it was the books in the suitcase that would help me analyze the pattern. He's a teacher at a magic academy, so if I discount the magic books, there were some unusual books other than that. I looked through the books. Watcher in the Rye Lingert's philosophy book, Trace of Totalitarianism, and 100 Years of Solitude. Novels, autobiographies, and even the bestsellers of non-fiction books. Among them, there was one book that stood out to me. Gentleman's Culture, This Is It. I remembered Ludger's appearance that I had seen on the train. His trivial actions and somewhat unkempt behavior, the way he shook his legs slightly or tapped his fingers. If he had really seriously considered the gentleman's culture and read that book, he would not have acted like that. Moreover, this book is the most shabby. A part of the book's cover was worn out and deteriorated. It means that he read it often, but was there a reason for that? This book was being used as an interpretation of the cipher. I opened the gentleman's culture book and turned the page. Whirr. There were marks of wear in between the book's pages. Some pages had not been read, and some pages had been read to the point where the papers were worn out. The regularity hidden in the irregularities slowly caught my eye. When I looked carefully at some particularly worn pages, I saw something between the letters. I immediately brought the letters and compared them side by side. The continent is said to speak a unified language, but each country has a slightly different language. The traces of Ludger Chelsea originated in the kingdom of Quioden, so I could think of the Quioden language. In particular, the letters explicitly contained traces of some proper nouns or dialects used in the kingdom of Quioden. Although it is a small and barren kingdom in the north, Quioden, which has produced a considerable number of great writers, has 20,000 words used in its dialect, of which 8,000 words among them are high-quality vocabulary. This must be the point of the cipher. Given the connection between the arrangement of the language and that letter, it was not difficult to distinguish between the ciphers. Because I know the Quioden language, as expected, it's what I expected. When I racked my brain and checked the code in Quioden language, I found a connection between the words in the letters. Etc. next to it was a mixture of some words that symbolized numbers. The numbers represented the pages of the cipher codebook, and if I interpreted the other words and combined them, first order, infiltrate into Surin Academy as their teacher and gain their favor. I'll keep track of the situation and deliver the order to you. It became like so. I couldn't get any crucial information, but that much was enough. I leaned my head back after I closed the gentleman's culture book. The remaining 2 years, I had to live as a teacher at the academy and an executive at a secret society. Of course, I couldn't live like that forever. Even if I spent 2 years as a teacher safely, there was still a barrier of the secret association. Their presence was very annoying to me. If things get awry in the middle, I'd most likely be killed. But I can't get rid of all the secret society members by myself. I don't know how the organization is structured, but they even planted spies at Surin Academy. I'm sure they're pretty dangerous. It'd be impossible to deal with them individually. However, if I left them be, that secret association would be a shackle that held me back, so I had to get rid of them. Then how? I should use the power of the academy. There is a saying of let the barbarians fight it out among themselves. Control a barbarian to handle another barbarian. Surin Academy was not a mere school. It was a place that symbolized the future of the era by fostering the future of the empire. Although it carried the name of an academy, it is not impossible for the academy because it had so much power that it could make an impact on a country. If Surin and the secret society go against each other, no matter how great the secret society was, they'd obviously be pushed back. How many soldiers and wizards are staying there? There was even a possibility that the Knight's Order would also make a move because it is within the scope of the imperial decree. They knew that, so instead of choosing to take the bull by the horns, they had planted spies. In other words, I had to carefully dig out their information and leak it to the Academy in a way that wouldn't let me get caught by the secret society. Of course, if I take quite a long time to do that, my tail will get caught. The secret association could purge me for betraying them, and the other way around, the Academy could suspect me as a spy and rule me out. In the end, it was important to keep the right line. The moment I leaned too much on one side, all that'd be waiting for me was absolute destruction. It's like riding on a single rope while holding a long pole. I should never be biased against either side. For now, let's think about the first class that's going to be held in a week. There was no mention in the command that ordered me to do anything. It was for me to gain their favor, so it meant to positively engrave my image as a teacher. If so, first of all, performing my duty as a teacher was the priority. Surin is a place where smart students go, so if I showed any lack of skills for even a bit, I might have been bitten by the students. Talented children at the age of growing up usually think they are the best, and will even look down on their teachers. I didn't know what the place was like, but I knew from my long experience that the places where people live are all similar to each other. There are so many things to consider. I should not look ridiculous to the students, and I shouldn't look suspicious to the Academy, and I should not let the secret society find out about me. I wondered what this was all about, but if I endured all of it, I would get a suitable reward. Yes, I could bear it enough for that. After I got out of bed, I entered my private study and opened a magic textbook. I had to make plans for the future and prepare for how to proceed with the class. The remaining 2 years. I couldn't just play around throughout the years the first day of school had come. Students who went down to their hometowns during the vacation returned one by one, and new students of the current year came in along with a new semester. The students who were previously first years crossed the school gate in anticipation of what new classes they would take in the future as they advanced to the second year. Throughout the classroom, the sounds of students meeting their friends again, which they had not seen for months, and the sounds of them greeting each other happily could be heard loudly. But all of them were learners who took classes at the same academy, but not all of them were the same students. There were noisy students and quiet students. Naturally, the atmosphere was divided among students, and of course, it was determined by their status in society. Inside Surin Academy, students were largely divided into 3 classes. The upper class, led by royalty, aristocrats, and high-class clergy. The middle class, led by wealthy merchants. And finally, the lower class consisted of poor commoners. Even if they were all students, they could not ignore each status, and accordingly, they built walls without realizing it and divided their classes within the academy. While the nobles smiled brightly and greeted each other, on the contrary, the commoners often looked around or gathered quietly among themselves. It was the same with the upcoming classroom of magic casting. Hey, did you hear about it? What? There's the theory of magic casting and the understanding of element class. I heard the new teacher will do it. A new teacher teaches second years, not first years. I guess he's pretty good. They can't help it. The former teacher is out. I heard that his past records are pretty fancy. I've heard that he's from the military and he has published a lot of theses. Doesn't that mean he's an amazing person? He's extraordinary. But you know what? What? He's from a fallen aristocrat family. At the words of the fallen aristocracy, naturally, sneers emerged from the mouths of the faction that was leading the conversation. Those who disgraced the noble name of aristocracy. It was common for the fallen aristocracy to be treated less honorably than a wealthy merchant among the nobles. I think they could only be a little bit higher than commoners. Since he was appointed as a teacher of Surin, he might be skilled, but he was bound to be looked down upon by the upper-class students. At the same time, aristocratic students had similar thoughts. If the new teacher was from a fallen aristocrat family, it'd be a piece of cake to get a good grade in his class. As soon as each student talked about what kind of person he would be, The front door of the classroom opened silently. Everyone's eyes turned to the front door. A man was entering the classroom through the open door. Chapter 10, Fake Job 2. The man was like a quiet lake with a rising mist at dawn. He was cold, chilly, and calm. Just like an unshakably calm lake's surface, his every action was restrained, calm, and meaningful. Even when he closed the classroom door, even when his shoes stepped up on the podium, even when he put the papers on the desk, there was not a sound. The stillness engulfed the entire classroom like a ripple on the surface of water. Oh. Even the noisy aristocratic students were swept away by the atmosphere and closed their mouths. The students, who were calm, looked at the main character who was standing on the podium with their eyes shining out of curiosity. The suit that was suitable for his handsomely tall figure did not have the slightest bit of wrinkles. A black frock coat on top of it fit his body even better. It was classy attire, but it didn't appear to be too flashy. When the man took off the silk hat on his head and threw it lightly, it gently flew toward the hanger in the corner of the podium and settled down safely. With a series of gestures that seemed so natural, his face that had been hidden by his hat was finally revealed. He had a sharp jawline and a straight nose bridge along with unwavering eyes. His strong yet charismatic eyes were sharp enough for him to not seem to be a new teacher. His hair, which was considered long for a man, was neatly tied at the back of his neck. Gulp. Some noble students who had been secretly talking behind his back were weighed down by his vigor and gulped down without realizing it. Nice to meet you. My name is Ludger Chellisy, and I'm the new teacher at Surin Academy. The moment he opened his mouth and raised his voice, it was like pouring water on dreamy smudges of watercolors. The atmosphere of the classroom, which had been immersed in silence, returned to reality. I won't start the class right away because it's the first day of school. However, I will make a prior notice before that. I slowly hung the frock coat that I had taken off on the hanger. It was not difficult to carry on the conversation. I just had to recite the words that came to my mind at the right time. It was like some sort of play acting. I'm an actor on stage, and the students are the audience. All I have to do is follow the flow in harmony and continue the monologue naturally. The script was all in my head. My class is about magic casting, but I won't teach you magic casting unsophisticatedly. I'm going to focus on applying magic in real life beyond the principles, a little closer to the actual practice. As I skimmed through the audience, I could see several people flinching their shoulders. That was a good reaction. Since there were soldiers who had also become teachers in the past, there were no students who thought it was strange for me to maintain that kind of tone and such intense eyes. And not only the second years, but the first years can also apply for this class. In other words, it's a joint class for the first and second years. My words began to create a buzz everywhere. All the students who had gathered were sophomores, so it was no wonder that they were confused. However, it was not impossible because there was no school rule that classes should be divided by year. As soon as the noise died down, I opened my mouth at the most appropriate time. Stop. Silence. The noise inside the classroom disappeared in an instant. Everyone's eyes were staring at me again. As a second-year student, it is natural to complain about having to take classes with a first-year student. But don't worry. I'm not going to teach the first years the basic things to learn just because of my consideration that they're beginners. The words were welcomed with relieved responses here and there. Surin Academy's teaching method is more like a university than a high school if compared to Earth system. However, it is not completely the same as that of a university, so it can be said that it is vaguely mixed a little bit. The award and penalty point system are typical examples. The students of Surin choose the lectures they want to take according to their specialties and take credits by completing the subject. Students there are called prodigies wherever they go. Even if they are in the first year, there is no significant difference compared to the second year. I decided to focus on that and conduct joint classes for the first and second years. Why? Because when the second years get together, it is inevitable that the story about their teacher will spread out. The curiosity and main topic of the second years, who had already known each other enough for a year, were bound to be me, their newly appointed teacher, instead of their classmates, who were in the same year as them. But what if freshmen who just entered the school attended the same class? The concerns of the second years would be focused on their juniors in the first year. Then the number of people who are talking about me would definitely decrease. There might be complaints, but they wouldn't fuss any further. The existence of the first years was a kind of smokescreen and seawall that made me not doubt my qualifications as a teacher. Why do you let freshmen take this class as well? Someone raised their hand and spoke. Looking at her, she was a girl with long, wavy blonde hair up to her waist. Her unwavering eyes that were staring at me had a strong sense of righteousness. People around her recognized her and they were talking to each other afterwards. What? Is she a popular kid? Looking closely, she looked familiar. That face? I've seen it somewhere. Someone who makes me uneasy when I think of her. Since I was asked a question, I decided to answer it. Because I thought they needed an opportunity as well. What do you mean by opportunity? I think it's very unfortunate that only a selected year can take my class. It's never the right attitude as a teacher, giving equal instruction to everyone regardless of their year. That's what I think. Well, she would ask me why I didn't mention the third year and higher afterwards. Of course, they could take my class if they wanted to. However, it would be difficult for third years to digest the essential subjects that they had already learned right away. Actually, I could only afford up to the second year. Of course, that means that my classes are not year-restricted. I'm confident that it's definitely different from the existing system. Well, it's not like I was just saying it without thinking. I'd made sure I was ready for the class. For a peaceful future, I was referring to a few tips that I had, so there's nothing I couldn't do. It's hard to understand unless you explain exactly what class it is. If you are curious, just come to my class. It's not fun if I tell you in advance. As I spoke while intentionally piquing her curiosities, small wrinkles formed on her forehead beneath her blonde hair. I'm sorry, but I don't intend to tell you what I'm about to teach right away. On the contrary, I'm going to make you feel impatient and more curious. If there weren't any unknown classes in which no one knew what would be taught, the students in the academy wouldn't feel wary of anything. However, let me warn you of one thing. If there's anyone who wants to take my class with such an absurd idea that I'm a new teacher and that they will easily get credit. After deliberately catching my breath and taking a break, I said the last words in a strong tone. At that time, I will personally engrave what real education is into your bones. If they interpreted my last words, then it meant, please don't come to my class. If they had to take classes with the freshmen, it would quite hurt their pride as sophomores. I even warned that the class would not be easy, so those with high self-esteem were likely to pass it by saying, that class, I won't take it. I scattered landmines in such a way so that if they stepped on one and exploded, it'd honestly be the fault of the person who stepped on it. Of course, I would be disqualified as a teacher if I just spouted that out. I made a deep hole in the process by wrapping it as a reasonable cause. There's a reason for everything. You'll know when you take the class. It was different than throwing irresponsible, empty promises, but what could I do, of course? That is the only way I could do it since I had never lived by standards. That's all. Any questions? I was directing the question to students who might have prepared to raise their hands and argue with me. It was quiet inside the classroom. When Ludger asked if anyone had any questions, none of the students raised their hands. Everyone was just rolling their eyes and looking around. It's not that there were no questions. Small questions about how to do the assignments, what the exact curriculum of the class is, or what was going to be taught that had all been asked before were also pretty good. But no one ever brought those questions out of their mouths. Everyone was overwhelmed by the spirit of Ludger jealousy. That's the new teacher. They said he was a soldier. His atmosphere is no joke. There's a rumor that he's at least a fourth rank. Is it real? The incredible pressure from a young man. It is not mere imagination that they feel suffocated just by making eye contact with him. Even the aristocratic students, who looked down on him for being a fallen aristocrat, avoided Ludger's eyes and dryly swallowed their saliva. If the upper classes were like that, how could the other students dare to come forward? That was what everyone unconsciously felt as they listened to Ludger's speech. That man never spouted out anything carelessly, his eyes, way of speaking, and even his confident tone of voice. He could never show that kind of gesture unless he was truly proud of his class. What on earth was he going to teach them? If it wasn't based on theory, was it practical? How would he teach the practices? Such complex thoughts formed and disappeared like bubbles in everyone's heads. But there was only one thing for sure. A class taught by the teacher named Ludger Chellisy would never be easy. No questions. He repeated the question. He seemed like someone who wanted a question, but the students weren't fooled. The moment they raised their hands and opened their mouths, they'd get stamped out by Ludger. Just seeing the look in his eyes that seemed to be glaring at them wanting to get some prey, his willingness to not allow any questions was conveyed well. The blonde girl who raised her hand beforehand sat still as well. No questions. Then the first day of school has finished. The first day of school. That's how the breathtaking orientation ended. When the orientation was over, the students got up one by one and left the classroom. I watched the scene carefully from the podium. I'd said everything I wanted to say, so everyone understood everything, right? But it was honestly shocking that no one raised their hands when I asked them to ask some questions. Until the night before, I had prepared to take all kinds of questions and even prepared the answers, but all of them were useless. If it's an academy like this, aren't there only children with strong ego here? I thought they'd think that I was ridiculous and ask me a lot of questions, but did I think too much? No. Wait a minute. It could be the other way around. What if they intentionally chewed on my words? I'd heard of it. That is often the case in Korea in the 21st century. When a new teacher arrived, the students would purposely not give them any attention and look down on them. Such was often the case with female teachers in particular. It was mainly the way of the school bullies to take the lead in the class instead of the teacher. They would quietly throw a mutter like, "Ah, he's hella loud." And if the teacher got mad, they would respond with, "I didn't talk about you, though." They had that undeniable technique of bullying. Maybe it's a similar case since no one has responded to me. I had tried to be as serious as I could to look scary, but had it given the opposite effect? Perhaps my oppressive remarks and actions have disturbed the pride of students who thought they were geniuses. Then it's a big problem. The way juniors look down on their seniors in the military, subordinates look down on their superiors in the workplace, and students look down on their teachers in school. It is often described as being eaten. It is obvious that if someone loses their leadership in the beginning, they would have setbacks in their future classes. Then should I treat them in a more gentle manner? No, if I do it all of a sudden after what happened, they'll think I'm weird. I'm just going to push it to the end since it has already become like this. It is rather not my cup of tea to smile and be friendly. That is my nature, and the identities that I acted out mostly have that kind of personality. And it had been 3 weeks since I arrived. Everyone already knew what kind of person Ludger was. It would be ridiculous to change my personality at that point when I was obviously a soldier with a military record. I put on my hat and walked away with the frock coat that had been on the hanger. In the meantime, the remaining students in the classroom did not approach me. It's not that they didn't have any interests, because I felt the way they were trying to analyze me. I thought they'd ask me common questions such as how old I was or if I had a girlfriend, but I didn't know that they wouldn't say a single word. It's scary. Kids these days. Step. Step. I walked slowly down the hallway, leaving the classroom at a leisurely pace. It was the first day of school anyway, so it was the end of today's work. Since the course registration correction period had not yet ended, those who wanted to change their course could change it, and those who didn't could settle with it. The first class would properly start in 3 days. Until then, let's seriously think about how I can take the lead of the class from the students. I should at least avoid being told that I'm not qualified as a teacher. Thinking so, I looked at the front, and I saw all the students who were walking in the hallway looking at me and avoiding my path. When both the boy and girl students spotted me walking, they were surprised and stuck themselves to the wall or window. What? Why are they being like that? had the rumor of a new teacher, who already seemed like easy prey, spread throughout the academy. I had heard that there was a community in that academy like the university community called Everytime, where you could exchange opinions with each other inside the academy. Was that why? When I felt like my future class was going to be pretty rough, someone talked to me. Hello. I stopped and stared at the woman who was smiling as she was talking to me. You're the new teacher, Ludger Chelsea, right? Yes, that's right. She was an attractive woman with pink color and a slight curl at the tip of her hair with a warm smile that resembled sunshine. I don't think she's a student since she's not wearing a uniform. Maybe she spoke with a great fuss before I was able to find out about anything. Oh, as expected. Nice to meet you. My name is Selena. You're a new teacher at Surin Academy, right? I'm your colleague, Mr. Ludger. I see. Nice to meet you. When I looked at her as if asking what business she had with me, Selena looked around a little embarrassedly and spoke quietly in a low voice. Well, have you eaten yet? For more chapters, join my Patreon, link in description.